Welcome back to Cinema Pursuit. This week, it's July 4th weekend, and we have a shark in the water. Zach, what's going on today?
Man, I am ready to go. For anybody that can actually see us, I'm wearing my starfish button up.
This is our first video podcast, so if you're listening on audio and you want some video, actually go to YouTube and you can actually see us now.
Yeah, because you got to be able to see Kat's beautiful duck floaty earrings she has on. They're massive. They're like the size of donuts.
Literally are.
So if you would like to see them, it is there on the video portion of this pod. So go check it out.
She's just wearing a couple of Krispy Kreme looking.
I should have gotten some donuts this morning because we're doing a morning recording. I wish I had some donuts right now.
For those of you who, I guess we've never said it before. Usually we record these at night, but, swimming in the water at night's not a good thing. You might get eaten by a shark,
Hey,
we're doing this in the morning to avoid it. Kat, for those who are listening, Kat has a shark onesie that she just pulled up to make it look like it's eating her. So,
okay, visual effects are done on my end. I'm sorry.
That's the thing. This would not exist if Jaws didn't exist. That's the whole
Correct.
point. This week we are talking about Jaws, 1975 classic movie from the legend, the GOAT. You can't even say enough words about the man, Steven Spielberg. This movie, this might have the biggest legacy of any movie of all time. I'm going with a hot take right off the bat, which is not really a hot take.
You know what? I was thinking about this, and it's probably this and Star Wars, right? From this era of the movies that have still stayed very important in the public conscious. And we don't have to get into what the current Star Wars mythology and how it's, seen by people now. Maybe it hasn't held up, but in the newer stuff. But Jaws, you go ask anybody, especially over like 30 or 40, what is the most impactful movie of their lifetime? A lot of them are going to say Jaws. Or what was the biggest movie of your lifetime, or the most popular movie of your lifetime? A lot of them will say Jaws. And
what about Jaws 3D though? What about Jaws 2?
3D.
Jaws of Revenge. Come on, man.
It built Michael Caine a great house, apparently.
Yeah,
Jaws 3D.
Jaws of Revenge.
I haven't seen Jaws 3D since I was probably about 16, 17 when I did a binge watch of all the Jaws movies, and that was by far the worst.
I watched it on Spike because they had them on like back to back, and I was just like,
Yeah,
I
of
might as
course.
well watch this. They're like, nothing else is on TV.
Yeah.
That's a very Spike movie, Jaws 3D.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
It's just an image that gets bigger rather than like an animated shark. It's just so funny.
I remember there being a shot where it's like the shark is like coming towards the camera underwater, and then like some glass breaks, but it's just like some weird, it's like CGI glass, and I'm just like, okay, whatever. I guess we're just running with this. And it's supposed to be at like a SeaWorld or something like that. I was like, okay. Like John's back and he's pissed. Like Shamu, like we've seen the Cove, we've seen Blackfish. We're not about keeping these animals in cages anymore.
Yeah, the sequels will just pretend don't exist.
Hopefully, this is the last time we'll be talking about the sequels. So,
actually, we'll talk about it a little bit.
Let's talk about specifically Jaws. Vikash, why this movie?
Why this movie? Like I said, this is like the perfect summer movie right here. And it's been 49 years since this movie came out. 50th anniversary is this coming year. And it started Spielberg's career. He did Sugarland Express and Duel before this, but this is the movie that gave him everything that he needed. And what is Jaws to you, Zach? I mean, like, is it a horror movie? Is it an adventure movie? I can't even put a word to what this movie is. I think it goes through so many genres in the best way possible.
I mean, there's an easy word that can be used to describe this. This is the first summer blockbuster movie. I'm going to have a hard time saying anything about this movie that hasn't been said already, but it hits that very rare intersection of both importance in film history and also popularity among the general public. Often it's one or the other, where the movies that are historically significant maybe are frequently not movies that like your uncle can spend half an hour rattling off quotes about. Jaws not only created like this summer blockbuster, but it also is like the gold standard of what audiences expect from a fun summer movie.
If that's the standard, then we've been disappointed for a while. I mean,
Quite a long time.
I think, it is the first I think it's the first blockbuster. I think pop culture was born because of this movie in the sense of what we know it as today.
Interesting.
Because the legacy, like I said, the legacy of this movie is unlike anything we've ever seen before. And it is one of the most seen movies in a theater. I'll get into it in a little bit. But do y'all have any memories for Jaws growing up? Because I've got a few.
Well,
Go.
like, Jaws was a movie we watched pretty much anytime it was on TV, and it was our summer movie of choice. We watched it every Shark Week, we watched it around 4th of July. At least one other time during the summer, it was a regular reoccurrence in our house. So it terrified me to swim in the ocean and even like the lake and stuff, but it's okay. I got past that fear. And even as a kid, it was one of my favorite summer movies.
It's funny you say that because my dad, growing up, I think he's 75, so he was like 15, 16 at that point. And in Mumbai and Bombay, like he lived pretty close to the beach, like walking distance. And after Jaws came out, he was like, yeah, it's the best thing because no one would go to the beach. The beach was empty. I was like, okay, because he didn't care.
Genius.
He was just like, Jaws, like, I'm not scared of Jaws, but like, it's just fun. Like it's freedom essentially in a big city because Jaws came out. Like people were that scared of the water, even across the world.
It's pretty funny. I put this in my letterbox review. So growing up, I didn't really watch this movie. I think the first time I watched it was the summer I graduated high school. We went to a local beach near me, put it on did an outdoor showing of it on a projector. And that was the first time I actually sat down and watched it from beginning to end. Anything I caught before had just happened to be on TV. And I think the reason for that is what you just said. That probably this would have scared the crap out of me as a kid. Honestly, it's still pretty. There's parts of it that are still pretty frightening when you watch it today. Not like what maybe a modern horror movie would do to you, but it's still there's something about just the man versus nature purity that Spielberg brings out of this, especially in the second half, that is terrifying.
And it's I think it's something where it's like they have the man versus nature stuff, but I think a lot of movies really took from it, right? I mean, Alien is very much, we have the xenomorph on the ship and it's just Jaws in space. That's how Ridley kind of sold the movie to the studio as. I'd say there's a lot of movies. There's a Crawl, which is an alligator, but there's all these other movies where it's like there's some sort of like mythic or some sort of nature power
Mm-hmm.
where you're just fearful of it. Twister is a big one. Twister's coming out this year. Y'all better be hyped for that. I'd say Nope. Y'all haven't seen Nope from Jordan Peele, but that's an alien, but it's the same sort of like Jaws. It feels like Jaws to me. And I think a lot of people would agree about that. Not to mention there's so many like actual like whatever water-based movies, The Meg, The Shallows. They got too many shark movies now just because of this one shark movie.
Yeah, agreed.
But that being said, y'all, have I ever told y'all the story about like the Jaws ride? Like the first time I went on the Jaws ride at Universal?
I
No,
don't
tell
think
us.
so.
I was 8 or 9, and I went with like my aunt and like my 3 cousins and Barth, like my brother. And it's me. I'm sitting either at the edge or like no, I was sitting the third seat. I was sitting towards the middle. Then it's my cousin, and then it's Barth at the edge. It's my brother at the edge. And for anybody who doesn't know about the ride, go and watch it. They have it on YouTube, even though it's gone and now it's Harry Potter. It's it's the Gringotts ride now, but he's sitting there and literally Bruce, the shark comes out of the water. We don't know what Jaws was at that point, like 8, 9 years old. And my brother literally jumps into my cousin's lap and he's just freaking out. I was freaking out too. I was just like, I was frozen, but my brother literally jumped. And I was like, what if he jumped into the water? Because the water is like literally right there. It's not even, there's no difference of like sitting in the boat and then sitting in the water. Like literally you could just step out. But yeah, Jaws terrified me from a young age. But after that, I mean, like we watched, like I didn't have Jaws at home. We had Jaws Revenge, like the Michael Caine the one. We had that at home, so I saw that quite a few times. But I saw Jaws on TV, but I kept going back on the Jaws ride over the years when they had it before they took it out. So I always loved doing that. I mean, like we went it was a family adventure at that point. It was awesome, but they didn't care about that ride. Harry Potter matters more now in this land.
It's more profitable.
Yeah, I mean, I think I only
Honestly,
got
it
to go
is.
on Jaws once, and I think it was with you actually, Vikash. And it would have been when we went down during high school.
Did we? I don't remember going on Jaws.
I thought so.
Y'all
Maybe
went
I'm
to
imagining
Universal
it.
for your
No.
senior year trip, right?
They took it out because they were building what do you call
Were,
it, Harry Potter at that point.
were they still building it at that point?
Yeah.
No, like
Okay.
it came out. So as soon as we graduated, I went to Universal, and that's when, like 2014, they had Gringotts open. Like that part of the
Oh,
park opened that year.
maybe I
Zach, you're thinking when we did the backlot tour ride
Yeah,
at
they still have it
Universal
there.
in LA,
Yeah, they still have it there.
Oh, you're right.
because
It
that's
was
where
in
we did it.
LA. Yep.
Yeah, you and I
That's
went
it.
there around Thanksgiving of 2018, 2017, one of
Yeah.
those two.
One
But
in
we went on
LA,
the backlot tour.
pretty
Yeah,
small,
the
I'll say.
Universal
Mhm.
the backlot tour in Hollywood is 4 rides. It's like Earthquake
Mhm.
Disaster. It's got
Yep.
Fast and Furious. It's got
Yep.
that, and it's all just jumbled together. And in
Yep.
Universal in Orlando, closer to us, it used to be like 3 or 4 different rides, and now they're all gone. Because
The backlot tour is pretty cool. I really
next
liked
time,
that they had the
first
Jaws
time and
exhibit because they
next
gave
time I go
you
to
free
LA,
on it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
listen, we
it'll
got
be
to
worth
book
it.
that LA trip.
it's happening. That, and I mean, we'll be going to Disney too. I wanna go on these Star Wars rides. I'm excited for that.
Well, you missed the Star Wars Hotel.
Go watch
Bro,
that video.
I've been watching the thing. Jenny Nicholson, bro.
You've been
I
watching it?
yes,
Yeah.
bro.
I got on her
logged it on
Patreon
YouTube.
because of the video.
I logged it on Letterboxd already. I was just like,
It's on
like,
Letterboxd?
It's on
yeah, someone
Letterboxd?
put it
Oh,
on
I'm gonna go
Letterboxd.
All
log
right,
that
hold
later.
on. Stop
Holy
the
crap.
pod. We got to
Yeah.
go update our
No, wait,
Letterboxd.
when are we gonna do our movie podcast? But we're gonna do it on the Jenny Nicholson video. Like that's
We
if it's on
should.
Letterboxd, it's applicable, right?
I mean,
It's
it counts.
technicality.
So one of the top
Anyway.
comments is like, Jenny is so great with her critiques that she takes so much time with it that she, like, the place is already gone before she can like really go in on them. And I was just like, okay, that makes sense.
This is not a spoiler for the video if anyone cares about the 4-hour Star Wars hotel review. But there's a snippet where she talks about what she would like to see in that style of a hotel. And then I saw on her Patreon while scrolling through that she has a video where she's designing her own LARP hotel, which is essentially the same thing. We have not watched it yet. It is on my list. I'm going through all the videos right now. Totally worth it. Go get on her Patreon if you want to see all that stuff. So much content.
Hotel would actually be a good idea.
Yeah.
But not in the way they did it. They're like, oh, let's pay $2,000 or $4,000 and have these little dingy small rooms and make people, I don't know.
Oh.
No, there should be a LARP experience for Jaws. Honestly, put it in a
I know.
water
I was gonna
park,
say circle back.
Have someone swimming around and like you know, in a like you have the little fin coming up.
Me.
You know,
I got my onesie. I'm the shark.
Like a wave pool, maybe. I'm gonna call Universal. I think they need to have a
bar.
I think we got it.
They have to have a bar, and Quint's just in the back, just like drunk, just telling stories 24/7.
Actually, this might be more like a Six Flags thing than a Universal thing.
That actually makes more sense.
Yeah, that's on brand.
But Zach, why don't you grow out the beard a little bit? Then you can just put on the jean jacket, put on the jeans, and then you're gonna be Hopper.
I wish
watching geologist for
watching
Halloween.
Hopper in this movie is like that's
Hooper.
The type of Hooper, whatever.
Hooper.
Yeah, Hopper. I'm thinking
Hopper. You're thinking fucking Bug Light.
Yeah, or Bugs Light, whatever. Hooper. Yeah, man, that's like the ideal look. Like if I could grow the beard out, like I would totally be rocking that. But my hair's not curly enough either. Like I can only try to achieve that.
I mean, it's fine. I mean, who wants to look like Richard Dreyfuss fully though? I mean, we do not condone that man. For anybody who doesn't, or no one knows this, we had a movie that shot at our school, like me and Zach, when we were in high school, called Killing Winston Jones. Look it up on IMDb. You'll see why the movie's not out. But when, Richard Dreyfuss and Danny Glover came there, and the person I heard that was just like the worst, most pretentious, just thinks he's the coolest, hottest thing, thinks everybody else is stupid. The world revolves around him. It's Richard Dreyfuss. Like, he was just that pretentious of it. Okay, I'm not gonna say that word.
Wait, Vikash, tell him who else was on the movie, by the way.
Ooh, Danny Masterson,
Danny Masterson. So you had Richard Dreyfuss,
John Heder,
Danny Masterson, and John Heater, at least two of them were getting like drunk at a high school filming this
Oh
movie
yeah,
that we
no,
were
literally,
there watching.
I get off the bus and we're sitting in the cafeteria, right? Like we come in from the bus port, we come into the cafeteria, we're chilling before we go to homeroom, and Danny Masterson sits down like maybe like two tables down, so he's not far from us, and I think he's probably just on his phone or something. And a PA comes up and just puts down a plastic, like a tall plastic cup, like a pint of beer, and I was like, what's going on? Why is Hyde over here drinking like that? And everybody got photos with him. I'm like, nah, I'm good. I don't know what it is, but the vibe is off about this man. And I was right.
Weird. Like, to circle it back, under my why this movie, I wrote that I love that I accidentally got a Hooper coded husband. Hooper was my movie crush as a kid for this movie. So, like, it worked out really well. If you want to edit a side-by-side, you can, but that's a lot of work.
But it's like, the thing is that Hooper in this movie, just as a character, he very much has this, like, he's got this, like, very dry humor that's kind of what we have, and it's almost like a zillennial vibe. Because every time, like, when the shark comes in, like, guys, he's back for another round. I was like, come on. It's like, that, yeah, he caught a shark, but that's not the right shark, y'all. Like, and he's got some good vibes. I think y'all gonna love the recasting I have, because it's gonna be good. I was talking about, so 1975. It's been 49 years since this movie came out, and this wasn't just a movie that. So I'm gonna preface this. We're gonna talk about Jaws, but I don't want to have the conversation that everybody else has had, in the sense that if you want to find information about one movie, you can go find all the information about Jaws. It is that one movie. And if you need to study a movie, it's either, like, I will say, go watch Mad Max Fury Road or go watch Jaws. Because you're going to learn so much just from those two movies about how to make movies and what movies actually are. But that being said, 1975. Zach, do you know what came out this year?
I did peek at the Best Picture nominees for this year, so I know there's a few big ones that came out.
Okay. So Jaws, obviously, that's the biggest movie. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest came out this year. Milos Forman. Dog Day Afternoon came out this year.
Love that movie. That'll be on the pod one day. That's a good one.
Sidney Lumet. 3 Days in the Condor. Dad movie vibes. Always fun. Towering Inferno, which I don't think you've seen, is Steve McQueen, Paul Newman. It's a disaster movie. That is the movie that won Best Cinematography this year, actually.
Yeah.
It's such a wild credit. Rocky Horror Picture Show, and then Nashville from Robert Altman. And for the international audience, Sholay, which is like one of the biggest movies in India. That movie was seen more than Jaws was.
And Barry Lyndon.
Barry Lyndon came out this year too? Oh, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, so like a stacked year. We'll get to that when we talk about Best Picture later.
There's also a Kurosawa movie too.
Yeah, exactly. It was a really stacked year, surprisingly, for movies, which is always good. You know, the 70s in general was a pretty, I don't know if it's the golden age, but it really did have a lot of lasting, impacting movies. And we're about to hit 50 years on a lot of those movies, or already have for some of those. And I think it'll be interesting to do retrospectives on which ones have kind of stand the test of time, like Jaws has.
The Exorcist, which was 73, so it's been 51 years. That is still one of the most seen movies of all time too. Where it's like, if anybody goes to Wikipedia, you can see the list where it's like the movies nowadays, once in a while, they'll like get up there with like, 150, 200 million, people going to see movies. But there's so many movies from even back then where you've never heard of the movie, but people have seen it. Like there's an Indian movie, Awara, from Raj Kapoor. This movie's from like 1951, but it was like the biggest thing in like the Soviet Union. Even this year, there was a movie, the biggest movie in almost all the countries across the world was Jaws. But there's a movie that Raj Kapoor made this year called Bobby. And just because it was Raj Kapoor, this one guy, the Soviet Union was in love with that movie. And that was the highest grossing movie that year in the Soviet Union. So never know. That's world cinema right there.
Do you think we'll see a resurgence of this style of movie now that we're hitting like a 50-year mark? People like to look back and do like a reminiscent, like not a recreation per se, but
I think we've been getting less and less of these.
You heard
type
that's
of
a
movies.
good. That's a good question right there. That's a good question. But you know what that is? We get remakes, we get rehashes. That's all we get. We don't get they don't go off of like my thing. I've talked about it on the National Treasure one, where it's like y'all need to go off of this vibe. Like there's Indiana Jones, y'all should follow that formula. They should look at Jaws and follow that formula, but they don't do it enough, or like at least properly.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna
they
hold
they
my
do like the
tongue. I got
knockoff
more.
bad sci-fi movie vibe, but they don't do like I don't want to say this is a serious movie, but it's got the very good formula of monster, a miscellaneous group of people who normally don't interact together, coming together to fight off said monster of form. We see that a lot as a concept, but like the formula that Jaws uses and has perfected, which I'll go into later on, we don't see that very frequently, like to that level. So I was
But like,
thinking maybe as we hit the 50-year mark, people might feel inspired. Probably not.
Yeah,
I
y'all are
mean, they're
stepping on my
inspired
soapbox.
because
Oh,
it's
I'm
like
sorry. My
if
soapbox
you
too, man.
if this movie, it's exciting, but it's also horrifying. It's thriller, but it's also not a thriller. It's almost a slasher, but it's also action filled. It's got a lot of politics, like a little bit of enough politics in there, just political commentary, and enough of like family. There's not family drama in this one, but it's like there's a lot of depth to this movie where it doesn't seem like it is in the first place. And yeah, we will talk about it in soapbox because I gotta get a
We all
little
do.
snippet for y'all.
Yeah.
Already on to action as the juice. The most juice scenes in this movie, Jaws, the summer movie, the summer movie. What is your action as the juice for this movie?
Undoubtedly, it's the final fight with the shark with Bruce. The last
Corny.
half of the the last half of the movie is just a vehicle of tension that just leads you to this final confrontation. Like I'm still shocked every time I watch it when Quint dies. Like I forget, like, oh yeah, they murder this dude. Like he is like coming in as hot as any actor has ever come into a movie to take it over. And they kill him before like we even get to the climax of the final fight. And it just feels like when you watch most movies, they don't kill characters like him at the end. Like he's too good. We can't kill this guy. What if there's a sequel? But by doing that, Spielberg signals to the audience, like as he continues to do this whole movie, that you don't know what's going to happen next. You don't know if they're going to make it out alive because I just killed this guy pretty unceremonially, and you got to deal with it. So I just love everything about the final scene. The use of just so many props, like how the CO2 tanks, using those,
Mm-hmm.
the interior design of the ship where everything's falling off and the ship is literally sinking and he's crawling around and climbing on top of parts of the ship because he's scared of water and can't swim. Like I don't know how Spielberg was able to block and think about where everything was supposed to be for a scene like that because it's got to be so complex.
You know what's funny about that? So there's a book. I'm going to reference this book. There's a writer recently. Her name's or she's a author and a filmmaker, Lauren Bonzero. I'm butchered her name probably, but she just
Okay.
made a book called Spielberg: The First 10 Years. So it's essentially going from like the first movies to like a little bit after Close Encounters, or a little bit more than that, like E.T. But in the book, there's a little excerpt if anybody wants to read it. But she's kind of talking about Jaws and kind of like pestering him, and she's like, oh, how did you think of like him like shooting this and like Quint dying and all this and that. I was like, literally when it got to the end of that movie, I was so ready to get to Boston Logan, to the airport, and get back to LA that I had everything done. Everything was thought out in my head. I knew exactly what I needed. I wasn't even thinking about it. Literally, he says it, like Spielberg says it. He's like, literally, as soon as the effects went off and there's shark meat everywhere, I was already off the set getting to the airport. He's, exaggerating, but that's like, he was that done trying to make this movie. Y'all know
He
how
knew what he
old
wanted.
Spielberg was, right? Making this movie?
He was
Uh-oh.
27.
Bro, I'm 27. You just turned 28, but I'm just like,
Yeah.
what am I doing with my life?
Yeah, exactly. This is, I mean, you're not making one of the greatest movies of all time at 27. You're not doing that. You're falling
Wow.
behind, bro.
Y'all are sucking. I still got some time before I hit 27.
You better
Just
start
like
writing the script.
less than a year.
No, but see, that's the thing. It's like when that scene, like, I honestly, like, this is yet again one of the most juice movies. And like you said, the last 45 minutes when they get on the boat and they
Mhm.
never get off the boat, That is the best part of this movie.
Oh yeah.
And it's just the entire tension of it. And you're talking about the boat just, collapsing, Quint dying. So it is horrifying how this man
Yeah.
dies. And this is a PG movie still. In 75, they didn't have PG-13 yet. Like, Spielberg's the one who's like really pushing the envelope with that. And this is a PG movie, and he
Yeah.
dies like that. A
It's
kid
incredibly
literally gets
violent.
eaten.
Yeah, it's so violent for what it's as a PG movie. It's even more violent than most of the PG-13 movies we see today, and even some of the R ones. Like if you put out like a PG-13 summer blockbuster that's everybody's supposed to see, it is nowhere near as violent as what we see when the shark, over and over dismembers people. You see blood in the water, but with Quint, he's literally getting eaten alive. That is insanely graphic, and for it to be a PG movie is hilarious.
Super bloody too. So like I had two for my action, and this is one of them because I knew at least one of y'all would pick one. But it's only 7 minutes until the credits. There's like 5 minutes of the movie remaining when we hit like
Oh yeah.
Quint getting eaten. There's 5 minutes left of the whole movie. So you're coming on and you're watching almost a 2 hour film. It's 1 hour and 57 minutes. In those last 7 minutes, including credits, is just this climax. And it's incredible how the pacing works. And then this is massive, but it's only it's only like 2 minutes of action. It's
But
wild.
one thing, I don't know why, but like growing up, I didn't notice this, was that Hooper and Quint don't exactly see each other again, right? Like after
Yeah.
or after Quint dies, Hooper's just in the water in the tank. I didn't even think
Yeah.
about the whole tension of all that, and I was just
Oh,
like,
yeah.
oh, like they don't really spell it out. Like Spielberg's just like, okay, we're just gonna keep going because it's like, what's the point of having a dramatic scene? Like, oh no, this dude died, but we kind of got along, but we kind of didn't. Like, it was a smart decision to not even like mention it at the end of the movie.
Yeah, they just say Quint, and then he just shakes his head, and they're like, okay. Because, I mean, you got to think Hooper was down, probably hiding in the like reef right there, and just trying to outlast whatever was going on, hoping that someone would get the shark because he was just fully vulnerable. And they did, but Homeboy had to hide.
Dude, Roy Scheider is so good in that final scene, that final like 15 whatever minutes, where
Mm-hmm.
especially right after Quint dies and he's having to play this very like I don't know, like he's trying to fight for his life and he doesn't have his glasses on either, so he can't see anything. They're still, I don't know, they might still be a little drunk at that point, probably. And he's like trying to, stumble around the boat and find ways to like find a weapon, get away from the shark, and it's so much physical acting that he has to do there compared to a lot of the other parts of the movie, and he just nails that. It just feels like a leading man performance when he gets to that point.
There's a whole problem with the reason why we don't have actors like him anymore. I know y'all probably haven't seen him in too much, but like Roy Scheider, his career didn't really go too many places after this. Like he has like 3 or 4 like really great movies, but after that, Hollywood just kind of did not give him his due. Like he was doing some like kind of the stuff that Nicolas Cage kind of does for the paychecks right now, sort of stuff. It sucks.
That's really surprising because he kind of has the build of the traditional leading man in Hollywood at that era. Like he
Mm-hmm.
has that Robert Redford type look to him,
Robert
or that
Redford looks
even
better than him.
well, even older. He has like almost a Humphrey Bogart look to him, where he's got that kind of old rugged face, but that's kind of the standard historic leading man face in Hollywood. Like I'm very surprised he never broke out more just
But
after Jaws.
talk about the 80s. You have more people like a Stallone, you know, Arnold, like the action guys kind of got hot. And
Yeah.
even I mean, look at what it is today. If you want to talk about it, a dramatic actor or a leading actor of anything, right? If I'm talking about Jake Gyllenhaal, Ryan Gosling, these are very good looking people. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, you have to really dig to find someone who's not good looking. No, I mean, it's not an offensive thing to say that. It's just the beauty standard,
No.
even for men, has shifted to a point in Hollywood and in, world cinema where they're not really condoning people who don't look like movie stars to be movie stars anymore. And it's a bad
Well, I
thing.
mean,
Yeah, you
historically,
lose
that's
that
how it's
rough
always been. I don't
edge.
think that's new. I don't. You look at all the other leading man movies in Hollywood's history, maybe they're beauties. Maybe people when they were 30 looked like they were 50 back then because of all the cigarettes or something. But, like, I mean, really, they do.
Quint,
Go look at them.
Robert
Yeah.
Shaw, literally. Robert Shaw in this movie, I think he said he was like 40 or 50 in this movie. I thought he was 60 or 70. Robert Shaw
Wait, I
died
need to
after
look
this
this
movie,
up.
like 5 or
How
10
old
years
was
after this movie.
How old was Robert Shaw in Jaws? I gotta know.
You can do math.
He was 51 years old. Oh my god, he was a little rough for 51.
Little?
A little rough.
A
Yeah,
little?
it was a little rough.
Bro,
I would have
my
thought in his
cousin is
60s.
51 and like she
No,
looks like
wait.
she's like
He died
40 at
when he was,
most.
no, he died when he was 51. He was in his late 40s when he did this,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he looks bad.
Jeez.
He died very soon after
Yeah.
filming Jaws. Oh
Yeah.
gosh.
Rough.
Is the alcohol.
Yeah, he was
Yeah.
46 when he filmed
But
it.
you need to watch From Russia with Love. He has a scene on a train, and it's one of the best scenes of any spy movie of all time. It is that good. It was a bit of action, but like it's one of those scenes where it's like, oh, this dude, I don't know what this man's been in, but like I love this man. And I think all these guys, I think Richard Dreyfuss, he was in American Graffiti. He wasn't big. Roy Schneider, also kind of a character actor, and Robert Shaw, all kind of character actors. And I'd rather have a movie like this where you've got character actors than you have all these other, dominant personalities. They play dominant personalities in this movie to some extent, but like off camera, essentially.
Well, I think
Yeah.
part of what works is that Roy Scheider's Brody is not a dominant personality, so he's able to bounce off of Robert Shaw and Richard Dreyfuss's and even Murray Hamilton's performances in a way that usually when you're a leading man, like look, I mean, it's a bad example, but Dwayne Johnson doesn't play well with people in his movies typically because he absorbs so much of the screen and he's not willing to play second banana to anybody. Roy
Ego.
is yeah.
Ego.
Well, exactly. And I mean, I don't know if this was something that was read in the script or Roy kind of thought about it, but there's a lot of times where he kind of stands aside and lets, Hooper do his whole sciencey explanation thing, or Quint just chew up the scenery and just, tell whatever, funny story he wants to tell. A lot of people would not be okay with that.
And that being said, my action of the juice, I've got 2 action of the juice scenes too. But my action of the juice scene, it might be the shortest action of the juice scene that we've had on the podcast thus far. Actually, let me talk about the first one because it goes right into the second one. The other one I had was the Kittner boy dying. And that's when obviously he's sitting at the beach and they have the whole the dolly zoom out thing that everybody knows this movie for, and it's one of the most iconic shots of all time. But that scene, the thing that stuck with me this time was at the end, everybody gets out the water. His mom comes up and is like, oh, where is he? And then Spielberg just cuts to a shot of like a pool raft, like the yellow little plastic pool raft. And it's just going in and out like with the wave, with the current. And I was just like, this is how Spielberg always knows how to do like imagery and symbolism. But this is one of the best things he's ever done in his career, where it's like, okay, this sets just that little one shot of like, this little thing in the water. That sets the tone of like how terrifying it is. You don't always have to show, the person dying, but it's like he keeps the theme in your mind.
That's a good point, that the violence in this movie is not usually direct. I mean, the Quint stuff at the end is very direct, but the other stuff is seeing blood, come up from the water, seeing blood wash onto the shore, seeing, the faces and the reactions and the horror of people running away, or seeing, this violence. But it leaves a lot to your imagination. And, I think as we've gotten better at CGI, maybe these horror movies have, not all of them, but some of them have forgotten that only showing part of something is a lot more horrifying than actually showing the whole act, because your brain will fill in the details with the stuff that is inherently more scarier to you. And it's almost Hitchcockian how, Spielberg does that in this movie.
I mean, everybody harps on it. It's like he was doing the Hitchcock thing from like Psycho, because the jaw, like Bruce wasn't working, the shark's not working, so he like worked around it. And I feel like, yeah, he did work around it, but it takes a very specific person to know when to do that and to make it work. Because this is not a movie. This is yet again another fantastic movie that was not easy to make. And despite that, it is a great movie. That scene really sticks with me. Obviously, the shark in the estuary, that whole scene too. Oh, man.
So what was it leading into that you're talking about?
After that, they go and catch the shark And after they catch the shark, that's not the shark. Roy Schneider comes back. Brody comes back home, and it's the dinner scene with his son, where it's like, I think the scene is probably like 40 seconds or something like that. Like the man is just straight depressed, and after that, he gets chewed out by Mrs. Kittner, like by the kid's mom, and yeah, he's having a depressing time at home, and his son obviously starts, miming him, and it's like one of the most human scenes that I think Spielberg has added to any of his movies, and to have that in essentially what a blockbuster should be is something that people should remember, because the scene between between them two is just, I think it's one of my favorite scenes that I always love watching. I think everybody loves this scene.
I make note of it, and I say that it adds some humanity to it. It kind of grounds you to like what is important to these people is their lives and their families. And it's very human and like a sweet moment, because also you see that all the time with the kids in your life, especially if you have your own children or kids in your family. They'll mimic you. They're at that age. There's so much potential and love, and it's such a sweet moment. And the fact that it's happening while he's basically on the verge of being like horribly depressed, knowing that there's children being eaten by sharks. He's seeing his kid and he's like, this is cute, but this is scary. And I love that scene. It's a beautiful scene.
He's like, give us a kiss. He's like, why? Because I need it.
It's so cute.
So I'm gonna throw to the Spielberg quote real quick that no one's actually heard. He might have said this before, but this is from the book. The scene was an exploration of human behavior that fascinates me. I think we improvised that on that moment of the day. I wanted Roy to show he was depressed, and his son imitates him. It lightens up the mood. And Brody can see that he does have a life outside of the job, that he does have children and a family. I remember when I was working on the script for E.T., and I wanted a similar scene where E.T. imitates Elliot, which leads to them communicating for the first time. I thought, hey, if it could work for Jaws, it could work for E.T. So it's like, it's always his perspective of like, just like, oh, let's just do this. It doesn't have to be in the script. Let's just do this. Come on now. Like, let's just figure this out. Because I think Spielberg has one of the greatest emotional like thermometers for any scene. Y'all haven't seen Godzilla -1 yet, but you'll see why he loved that movie so much. There's a lot that's taken from what he does.
He's a very instinctual director. He, especially when it involves scenes with children, he just has always had a knack for putting a child in the right place and having them say the right thing, to where if you're a kid watching the movie, maybe you kind of feel one thing when you see the scene, and once you're older, and possibly if you have kids, you read it a different way. And you see a lot of directors, they have kids in their movies, they're really not sure what to do with them. Spielberg's one of the rare few that know how to direct a child and how to make it impactful for whatever age or part of your life you're in.
And it's not always like he's like, oh, I've got to get this like kid to do this thing, and I'm gonna, it's not always planned. Like literally for Close Encounters, the movie after this, there's a point in the movie where he's literally on a ladder with a present, and he's opening the present, so the kid's looking at the alien vehicle, and he's supposed to be awed by it, right? And it's just Spielberg on a ladder just opening a present that he's going to give the kid. And he's like, cut, okay, we got our take. Okay, let's go. And that's the genius of Spielberg. And it's just 30 seconds matters. Like if that 30 seconds wasn't there, this movie would be, a little bit not as good as it is.
It's these details that really make this movie like top tier.
Oh, yeah. Do y'all have anything else for Action to the Juice?
I just have a jump scare.
Before we get into production value, what is this jump scare, Kat?
So there's this jump scare when Hooper gets in the water to go check out a boat in the middle of the night. A head pops out from the hull of the boat. And fun little story, I've watched this movie so much that I know exactly what it is. It's got this really high-pitched noise. It's awful and terrifying as a kid. But Zach and I went with the family to rewatch it at one of the theaters downtown. And I knew what was happening. So I made him jump out of his skin. I pushed him and I go, whoo.
No.
When the head popped out, I scared the crap out of him.
Every time.
That's my least favorite part of this movie.
No, that jump scare still works.
It does.
If you're watching with the pacing of the movie, it always works.
It always works.
One fact that I always love about that is that part of the movie, like that scene of like the head coming out, is Verna Fields, the editors, pool. They shot that in her pool.
That's awesome.
So they had stuff that they did on the stage, but like that specific shot of the head coming out, that was a pool. And that's awesome. We're going to talk about Verna Fields in a minute because she's the only editor that Spielberg's worked with besides Michael Kahn, because Michael Kahn started editing Close Encounters, and he's worked with him all the way up to his latest movie, which was The Fabelmans.
Yeah.
But that being said, details on details, even with being in a pool, let's talk about production value. What is the most impressive piece of this movie, whether it's a scene, moment, detail, where everything feels like it's left on screen, nothing is on the sidelines? What is the production value of yet another iconic gem of a movie, Jaws? Zach, production value.
Yeah, so I kind of held my tongue earlier when you guys were talking about pacing, because for me, the production value that stood out to me this time was how impressive the pacing is. Because, this is a 2-hour...
Verna Fields.
Yeah. I'm giving her credit, but essentially, this is 2 movies slammed into one that are about an hour each. The first half's tension comes from trying to convince the mayor that the shark is the problem before it's too late. And that's a whole plot that has a whole entire arc that's resolved pretty much. And then the second half is the conflict of finding the shark and killing it. So if you think about it, this is 2 1-hour films stuck together. So there's never a part where it lulls, because they're just constantly getting you to the next scene. And that's, we want to talk about how modern pacing is so much faster compared to older movie pacing. And I don't think there's anything wrong with those slower paced movies, but that just really stuck out to me this time. That it was like, oh, it goes from scene to scene so much faster than I remember when I watched it previously.
So it's about the cutting being faster. Just because you have more cuts and more shots does not mean that your movie is faster paced, because this is a 49-year-old movie. And if I go show it to my nephew, he's going to love this movie, right? I don't think he's seen it, but if I show it to him, he's going to love this movie. But why is it that this movie has stood the test of time? Why is it that anybody from like 7 years old all the way up to like 100 can watch this movie? And it very much is that pacing. That pacing is fast and it's timeless. It's timeless pacing right there.
Like, I remember telling Kat when we were watching it, the Robert Saul scene with him with the nails on the chalkboard when they're having the meeting, the panel, that comes up so fast into the movie. In my head, I was like, that's like an hour into the movie that happens. No, it's like very quick.
Like within 15 minutes, I feel like.
It's at least within the first 30, I think. So
yeah, it's further in than 15 minutes, but I think the thing is that the pacing is so perfectly done. I think when a movie has great pacing, I don't like sit there and like judge pacing when I'm watching a movie, but it's like, oh, like when I'm rewatching the movie, I can be like, oh, I saw this part. It feels like it's been like 10 minutes. How long has it been? Oh, it's been 20 minutes? No way. That means I was sucked into the story so well that it is lining up well. And it's like there's certain people, like Chad Stahelski was talking about how he was literally making the editors watch 2 hours, 3-hour cuts of John Wick 4 just so he can tell if the pacing is good or not. Because he's like, if the pacing doesn't work when you're sitting there all the way through, then it's not going to work at all. We're not going to just, cut this one little part. Obviously it sucks, but it's like, you got to push good pacing.
So yeah, that's a roundabout way of saying that the editing on this movie is an incredible feat, but it really is.
One of the best edited movies of all time. I'd compare this to Mad Max Fury Road in the sense that is so much more editing, but this is just as great editing.
One more thing I do want to add, I didn't write this down, but the POV shots from the shark's perspective paired with John Williams' score and like the editing that we talked about is still some of the most engaging horror filmmaking that I've ever seen. Still watching it, I'm like, I know how he pulled it off, but the fact that it works as well as it does is incredible. Because a lot of times the shots like that are kind of corny or hammy or whatever, but it just works in this movie.
Kat, go ahead.
I had 2 things. I'm going to go with the smaller thing, and then I'll get into the thing that everyone talks about. So what I really liked is the little detail of the shooting stars when they're hunting the shark overnight. And I was looking into it, and it's more than likely, I saw some conflicting things, but it's almost definitely more than likely a sign of Spielberg's like love and affinity for space and sci-fi. So shout out to IMDb for having like a whole list of trivia facts, because I had to scroll through that.
So that's actually something that he talks about, because he's getting almost pestered to talk about that. What he says about the shooting star sequence is that there was something so primitive about this battle, this duel between three men and nature, that it brought the cosmos into the equation. I wanted to do something that was otherworldly, even if a meteor in the sky is not a supernatural phenomenon. In fact, there's two shooting stars that I added optically under the line of the shark, becoming almost a mythic character. I also added fluorescence on the surface of the water when the barrels are moving around at night. That was also an optical effect, and it contributes to the movie reaching a mythical level. It was essential that it happened after Quint's speech about the Indianapolis. But it's like even he, at this age, he thinks about it.
I just love that little detail. I picked it up. I don't know if I saw the first shooting star, but I definitely picked up the second. And so when going through my outline, I pulled up the movie. I watched it on Amazon Prime. I pulled it up on my computer and just hopped around to where it was. And like, I double checked, I looked at it, and I was doing my research. I'm like, I like these little details that kind of guide your mind and your subconscious into thinking things like, yes, this is a kind of like a supernatural or like such a big cosmic event, with just the slightest little almost prophetic kind of symbolism. Because shooting stars are common, but in history and everything, people see them as prophecies. People see them as like signs from the world, like, hey, something's happening. So I really liked that detail. But then my other one is the thing that everyone else talks about, and it's the animatronic shark. So I don't know how much y'all want to dig into Bruce over here.
No, that's on you. Dig into Bruce.
I won't go too far because you can easily find all this information. Everyone talks about it. But I think it's so it's so funny that the shark broke, but they were still able to use this incredible animatronic, really cool technological advances for the time, to create this like really awesome interactive movie with the action scenes not having some dumb puppet or CGI. Like, they had a real good animatronic for it. And, if you look at it with the animatronic skepticism and such, yeah, you can see where it's just like doing the slightest bit of anything. But the fact that they achieved it, it looks great. I love it. Like, this is just the first version of what gave us the T-Rex for Jurassic Park. Without Bruce, we couldn't have the T-Rex. So I'm really pleased with it.
Kat, I mean, like, George Lucas has gone back and added CGI to the Star Wars movies. Think about if they went back, like Spielberg was like, yeah, we might as well just add another shark, just a CG shark, and like, kind of beef up what we had, with Bruce. You think that would be a good idea?
Jaws 3D.
He's like, I don't know. They had the shark.
No, it looks great.
So the producers, they bought the book, and I'm gonna go through this real fast. They bought the book. The book became a hit, and they pretty much went right into the movie. And the book being this smash success also helped the movie. And they were like, I don't know how they're gonna do this. We just kind of have to figure it out. And Spielberg almost even apologizes to the guys who made the shark because it was just a hellish time for them. They shot at Martha's Vineyard because they could get the shark into the water. It's like 30 feet deep right off the water, and they could shoot close to land, but it also just looks like just straight through the Atlantic all the way to England. It looks so fast. It looks like there's nothing but water, nothing to escape to. And the shark didn't work. Spielberg said there's points where he was getting 2 shots a day. That's it. And that's why this movie kind of sucked to make when they got onto the water.
Yeah, but it made it age well.
So speaking of that, and speaking of the water, got to give a shout out to my man Jeffrey Bezos. On Amazon, they have a 4K UHD version of this. I would suggest if you are going to watch it, that is the version to watch.
No. I suggest if you actually love Jaws, go buy a Blu-ray player. Go buy
that's fine.
The 4K,
sure.
The actual 4K for this movie, because the 4K is actually fantastic.
Okay, sure. But if you want to do that, fine. If you don't want to do all that, I'm just saying if you want to watch
available.
That's the version to watch. The water looks so pretty on that restored cut of it, and I don't know how to explain it, but there's something about that Martha's Vineyard water on this restored cut that just blows me away when I was watching it.
And even the shark still looks good. But
I think
what I
it's
was getting to is that the animatronic is part of why this movie ages well. Because CGI from 5-10 years ago gets outdated quickly on its own. So CGI from 50 years ago, you gotta be really cautious with because it's not
I
gonna
mean,
age as well.
CGI didn't exist
Well, I
49
know,
years
but
ago.
like, well, okay, you're putting in like hand drawn animation
No.
over
It's the
something.
best way they could have done it. Where Spielberg was like, they shot The Old Man at the Sea. That used to look really good. They did it on a set, painted, but this movie cannot be done on a set. We have to do this in the water, wherever we are. And they ended up shooting at Martha's Vineyard with the sharks and all that. Thoughts on Martha's Vineyard, Kat?
I was way too broke to go to Martha's Vineyard, but the fact that this was where I grew up, being like they mentioned Cape Cod, they mentioned Martha's, and they mentioned just like coastal islands and beach towns up and down the Northeast. It made it even scarier for me because I was like, oh my God, Jaws happened right here, right outside my door.
And
But no, I
that's
was
his
too
whole
broke to go to
point.
Martha's.
Because it's like there's the whole stuff of like doing the small vacation town
Yeah.
for the first half of the movie, and then for the back half also doing just there's nothing but water, we're on this boat, we're not cutting to anything else, and all those decisions mattered. And my production value for this movie is pretty much the entire movie, because this movie literally is film school, where it's like editing, effects, sound, acting, cinematography, directing, location, production design, set deck. Every single thing about this movie has intention. It could be anything from, oh, this is how the shark needs to look. They bought the orca boat. We need to make sure this boat has more windows. So every time we're looking out the windows when they're inside the cabin, that you can see that there's nothing but water and they're surrounded by just death, essentially. And even production design wise, they had to make sure there's no reds. Spielberg was like, oh, I don't need reds in any of the clothing and things like that. So we have red for the murder. Whenever there's blood,
Mm-hmm.
it's really personified every single time we see it. Like the audience's eyes really go to it, unless you're colorblind like Nolan, so you can't see it in the first place.
You're
But the only
100% on point.
but this is very much, this movie was one of the worst times Spielberg has ever had making a movie. And even then, going out in the water, making it for real, he made one of the best movies of all time. And he was risking something doing it, because he really thought after he made this movie, he's like, I'm going to get fired off this movie, or I'm just going to make independent movies after this, and that's just going to be my career. But this movie ended up becoming the blank check movie for him.
In a lot of ways, he ended up building out Universal that we know today at the studio. Like Jaws was the first one that he made for them that was a box office smash. And that studio owes a lot of what it is today to him
Oh,
specifically,
yeah.
which not other studios can't really say that.
And he only made 2 movies before this. He made Duel, a TV movie, and he made Sugarland Express.
Yeah.
That was the only 2 movies he had made. And even then, this movie, this was a $9 million movie. Inflate that up today, it's a $56 million movie. This is a mid-budget movie in today's buying power standard. And Hollywood, I think what's going to happen, like Kat was talking about, it's been 50 years. And
Mm-hmm.
the way things have been going recently, especially with the cost of movies, people going to the movie theaters, and everything in between, and streaming, I think we're going to see a lot more mid-budget movies where,
Mm-hmm.
like we saw last year, that Mario or Greta got a little bit more than 100 million, but Chad Stahelski, Nolan, they get less of money, but they get a bit of freedom to do what they do. And those movies did pretty well. Hollywood's going to really look at that. And we're going to get, hopefully not, we're not going to get necessarily movies like Jaws, but we're going to get movies that are kind of in the same vein of like lower budgets, mid budgets, that are actually trying to have good filmmaking in them. Because it's not the normal standard that you have a big budget movie that has great looking work.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
This film is iconic for film history. So you saying this is basically film school. The combination of like the set design, the animatronics, the editing and pacing, the color theory, just the storytelling and the story itself, it's all fantastic. And the fact that he went through so many difficulties and this was a hard movie to make just shows you can do something like this. And I love it. I want to see more things that like have this formula in the right way.
And I wouldn't say like even formula, I would say this like sort of filmmaking. And the one that I like, I talked about production design from like Joe Alves, but I'll really highlight Bill Butler, who shot this movie, who recently passed away last year, actually. But he worked on The Godfather, like second unit stuff, but he shot The Conversation for Francis Ford Coppola before this. And Michael Chapman, who Scorsese's like DP for a time. This man was a camera
Mm-hmm.
operator on this movie. And they have split diopter shots. They have so much little, obviously, like I was talking about the scene at the, the first bite at the beach. There's so much little camera work that's being done in this movie where Spielberg is really pushing it. We know Spielberg's camera work, it is legendary at this point, like the work that he and
Oh yeah.
Kaminsky do together. But on this movie, he was talking about how, or I'll read the quote, Bill Butler was inventive and created equipment just to make Jaws. There was a platform that could move with the tide or go above or below the surface of the water. He also made a special box where we could put his camera and film it in the water, but he reconfigured it so he could still pull focus on it. I wanted to make this movie to be at water level and have the camera right down where the human point of view is most accustomed to being, where when you're swimming. I'd say
Yeah.
about 25% of the movie was shot using that box that Bill Butler had configured for us. And this is what I mean by like good filmmaking. I'm gonna liken it to James Wan. James Wan does a lot of Spielbergy stuff, but he has people on his movies where they'll just make little rigs, and he's like, "Okay, we're gonna turn the camera when the rock gets pushed, or like he's like fighting Jason Statham at the beginning of Furious 7. We're gonna turn the camera all the way around. We're gonna do a 360 on a sideways rig, and can y'all make that for me?" Or like someone will bring it to them, and they'll just do that. But it's like
I love
people
that.
don't do that enough. They just do it.
No. Worst case, you don't like how it turned out and you just don't use the rig. I love that.
True.
That's so cool and so smart that they like built a whole setup to get that human POV. I mean, I knew that was like the logic behind it, but the fact that they like went through all those steps to get there is so nice and impressive. And you don't always think about stuff like that. A lot of people don't.
If you watch Jaws, it doesn't look like it was a hard movie to make. And some of the best movies, Apocalypse Now and all that sort of stuff, it's like the whole point is that this does not look hard to make. And they want to make it look that effortlessly great. Talk about like them creating like the steady cam and using it on Rocky and The Shining and all that sort of stuff. And these little innovations should be helping your movies, but you should also know when to use them and when not to use them. So it's like a Pandora's box, right? It's like once you open it, you got all this stuff, but you got to know when to shut the box. And Scorsese talks about it. He was talking to Timothy Chalamet. It's like, yeah, it's like you have all the, the basic stuff. We have all the same stuff, but it's like you need to know when to use it. And Timmy's just sitting there like, oh yeah, that's you right about that. Alrighty, on to dialogues. What is the most effective piece of dialogue for you in this movie, Zach? I'm not even gonna just what do you want to talk about for dialogue? I feel like we're gonna talk about the same little thing.
So I tried to go somewhere different with it because, we're going to have a panic on the 4th of July is like one of the best quotes ever, like in a movie. But I wanted to go with something else, so I didn't have to talk about that one. Need a bigger boat. Like that's another one. There's so many quotable things from this movie. When I was watching this time, the one that stuck out to me was the one that Murray Hamilton, the mayor, says at the end. So this is after the shark attack does happen on the 4th of July, and they're back in some sort of administrative place. I can't
It
remember
was
if
a
it was a
hospital.
hospital. I think it was the hospital. Yeah. And he's basically reaming the mayor about it, and the mayor's just trying to avoid eye contact with them, and eventually he just looks at him and says, "My kids were on that beach too." This is at the very end of that arc before they get onto the boat and go out into the ocean with Quint, where it ends the arc of the mayor. It's an acknowledgement of a personal failure. Our heroes Brody and Hooper were right, obviously, but this also gives some humanity to the mayor. His kids were on that beach too, and his decisions directly put him in danger along with everyone else in the island. He doesn't get redemption or any sort of formal punishment that we see on screen. It's just a more realistic version of this where the outcome is he has to just live with that his decisions brought others, including his family, into harm's way. And I think that's a really realistic and also smart way to end a character arc like that. There's so much need to perform justice, and they don't get justice against the mayor, really. Instead, the only justice you get is knowing that the mayor recognizes his failures as a person and has to live with that for the rest of his life.
But that's realistic. I mean, in real life, if a mayor
Yeah.
did that, I mean, he probably would get off scot-free, like, depending on what city it is. And
Hmm.
there's different version of this where he's supposed to, like in the book, he's involved with like the mafia and some other stuff. There's some other stuff going on in this movie, like script wise, but or whatever book wise. He's the real villain of this movie, right? I mean, nature is nature, but
Yeah.
his nature was caused by
He,
trying to help this town survive, but he was putting that above people dying, right?
Hmm.
he's the villain of the first half of the movie for sure.
So, Kat, dialogues. What do you got?
So I got a couple bits. I really lost it. I was laughing real hard when they
Hooper.
were sitting there.
Oh,
Actually, it was when Brody and his wife, Ellen, I believe, they were at home. He was having a drink and he was stressed out about work after the shark attack, the first one. And she goes, "Want to get drunk and fool around?" And he goes, "Oh, yeah." I was like, this is great. This is relatable. This is hilarious. And also, why is everyone in this movie an alcoholic?
but I think that's the thing. I mean, I'm not going to speak to either one of those aspects, but the thing is that this movie feels like it's on the ground. The entire movie
Yeah.
feels like it's on the ground. Yeah, there's this mythicality, like they've run with the mythicality of like the shark itself, but the
Yeah.
rest of the movie feels like it's very much on the ground. And that's why I talk about the scene with his son. Is like, it just feels like this is just some random guy who is
Hmm.
dealing with the biggest crap pile possible, and he's just trying to survive his job, trying to survive this move that he just had with his family to this, this little town, and he's
Hmm.
just trying to figure it all out. And it feels very relatable, but it's also
Yep.
very simple, right? And movies today, they're all like, it's like, I think it's also a theater system problem that this movie created, where it's like they want you to have some sort of big thing going on. This person has to be the leader of the FBI, or like they have to be in Shield, and it's Sam Jackson with an eye patch, and then he's gonna figure it out for us or something. It's like it has to be elevated, and
Yeah.
this is not elevated. This is simple. It's effective,
Yep.
and people still like this. It's like y'all, like they're not giving audiences today enough credit, I think, for having little scenes like this, and this is relatable. I like this.
These types of scenes are the things that I look for in a movie, because while there's a big overarching plot and maybe some really good like drama and storyline going on, I like these little moments where it's kind of a funny dialogue, but also it's relatable. It's very humanizing, and it's almost nothing. Yeah, they could have cut that and it would have lost like a tad bit of the humanity, but in theory, they could have cut it and the story would still be the story, but it wouldn't have this well-roundedness.
One thing Spielberg has consistently done across all his movies is he wants to humanize his main character.
Yep.
It's very important to him that you have to care about his main character, which most movies do strive for this, but he will always take the time to find ways to put scenes into his movies that build that character. The first half of this movie, it's part of it is a vehicle for you to care about Brody. So when we get to the second part, he's scared of water, that he's an alcoholic, that that he loves his kids and that he really does care about protecting the community,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're not sure if they even want to stay on Martha's Vineyard. All these little details that fill in the gaps of him as a character. Well, Quint has his speech where you get that, and even Hooper, you get a little bit of his backstory and motivations and who he is, but he spends the most time humanizing Brody. So then that final scene when Brody's trying to save his life, climbing all over the ship that's collapsing, you feel even more engaged to him compared to just a normal stand-in figure where you probably care a little bit less if he lives or dies.
100%. I really appreciate them just adding stuff like this throughout the whole film. There's a lot of stuff that they say, and I have it sprinkled throughout my notes, but that's the main one.
And it's like there's no way out with this movie, and that's the problem with most modern movies, is that they need a way out because they've got actors signed to 5 contracts and they have to keep going. And spoilers for Avengers Endgame, I guess, it really blew
Oh no.
everybody's minds out. Oh, they killed off half the characters, but there's no emotional tension behind that, like no true emotional tension behind that,
Mm-hmm.
because you already know Infinity War, excuse me, that because Endgame is coming the next year and we're gonna watch this movie and they're gonna have the characters. There's no, there's no sauce. It's like the end of Empire Strikes Back, right? That's obviously the most iconic one, right? That actually
Mm-hmm.
felt like you're gonna have an issue. What are they gonna do with this next movie? But even that aside, it's like just any movie should have this sort of stakes where it's like you have very human characters that are extremely humanized, and then they have to go do something mythic. And when they go and do the mythic thing, they might not make it out, right? Quint doesn't make it out, right?
You're hitting on a really good point. There's this certain feeling I get in some of these movies. I talked about this on La La Land, where the movie is going into uncharted territory for you. You know, we watch a lot of movies, and, you know, a lot of movies you're watching, you can kind of figure out where it's going, and it'll hit those beats, and you're not, even though you might not know exactly how it's going to get there, you kind of know where it's going. And I'm not just talking about Marvel movies. I'm talking about a lot of movies because we've seen, you know, plots are recycled, plot points are
I mean, all
recycled.
plots are recycled. I know what the plot is, but I'm not there for the plot. But when it comes to plot, that's what you're talking about.
Well, what I'm talking about is certain movies are like you're talking about them being safe, having to save people for the next movie. Certain movies don't care about that, and usually older movies, especially where, you know, sequels weren't as a heavy deal. Where Jaws really does put you into that uncharted territory where, oh, we're killing people. Oh, we just killed Quint. Oh, anybody can die now. Like, it's not like we're saving these people for another movie where in the back of your head you know they're safe. Spielberg puts you in this unease the whole time that is very rare to see in movies.
And it's not even like, yeah, Quint dies in the in the fourth quarter, but even
the last
like
7 minutes.
yeah, literally, and it's overtime at that point, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like, it's like, I think it's, you know, when the kid dies, right? When the
Yep.
Kittner kid dies, right? If any movie says F them kids, right? That's when you know
Yeah.
they have no, I wouldn't say there's no sanctity, but it's like even the most innocent are being taken away by this force of nature. It's like, I don't really,
It's taking off the safety
I
guards.
don't
You
want to
know, it's
make
like
this
bowling without the
comparison,
bumpers.
but
Yeah.
Oh
it's like
god.
Man of Steel when Kevin Costner, when Pa Kent dies, and he's just like, no, 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 let me die. And
Man
I
of Steel
disagree with that death so
spoilers.
much, but it's the same sort of like emotional feeling that like you're like, when it comes to nature, it's inescapable. It's technically
Mhm.
the opening of Twister, where like there's a father character and he literally gets pulled out of the cellar where he's trying to protect his family and literally just gets pulled away by a twister. And that's how they set the
Mhm.
tone for
Oh,
the movie. And that's how they set the tone for this
yeah.
movie too, where it's like no one is safe. And it's not
I,
like an outright thing where it's like, you know, like a main character
yeah.
died or something like that. It's just a regular person dying. And that, like, that holds value. Human life still holds value. And nowadays,
Mhm.
on, you know, 3,000 people in a movie, and I'm like, okay, now we're setting the tone. We need that many people to die. No, you need just one.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you need it to be in a way where it's not obvious this is the guy. What do they call it in Star Trek? The red shirts, right? Where those are the ones who are always designated to die each. It might have been a different color. I'm not
Or
a big
like
Trekkie, but the
red
ones
shirts or
who,
engineering.
well, whatever it is, the ones that are always safe to die in the Star Trek stuff,
Okay.
right? They're never going to kill the main cast, but the lower people
Lower
who we don't
decks,
care
yeah.
about will always die. Yeah, and so, you know, a lot of movies will do that. You know, where it's like, oh, here's a guy they just introduced for the movie, not a big actor, probably not signed on. You know, he's probably going to die later on, but that guy who's going to be appearing in the fourth sequel, keeping him. So all you have to do is really just in these movies to really set it off is just like you said, kill someone that, or hurt someone that you wouldn't expect to be hurt, like a kid or like a big actor like a Quint, where it's like, oh, we really don't care here, we're not saving people, we're not saving this for another movie.
And they need that philosophy even more. But let me hit some funny lines. I'd see, Kat, you're talking about the funny line. I was like, the funniest character in this movie is Hooper, like by far.
Oh, 100%.
He's, like I said, he's got that sardonic humor that I think you can see the little lines of, like, I think Nolan recognizes it too, that if you have a larger movie like this, like a movie that goes across audiences across the world, you have to have comedy to some extent. And this movie has comedy.
Mhm.
And one of my favorite lines is, boys, oh boys, I think he's coming back for his noon feeding. And obviously I can't do it justice, but like the way that he, you know, delivers that line, it's just hilarious. And it is very much the humor that we have of just our lives are, you know, we're just making light of every single moment possible, even if it's like the most dour moment. And it's awesome. I will say, obviously, we haven't talked about it, but dialogues, we have to talk about that scene, which is
Go
the
for it.
Indianapolis speech. It is the most
Yep.
iconic
Mm-hmm.
part of this movie, dialogue wise. I'll give the little piece from the legend himself, Spielberg, that the speech, the Indianapolis speech about the delivery of the atomic bomb, is my favorite part in Jaws. Spielberg said that, okay? Spielberg said that. It was conceived by uncredited screenwriter Howard Sackler, who wrote a one-page monologue as Quint is starting to talk about the why he hates sharks. It was a wonderful scene, and I kept trying to get Howard Sackler to expand upon it, but he felt shorter was better and never wanted to extend it. So one day, I was talking to John Milius. He's a screenwriter, and he was talking to John Milius, and he said, "Could you make this a speech?" And John said, "Sure, it's a great idea. I'll try." So John sat down and wrote page after page in longhand, and I believe a very, very long speech for Quint. I think he said it was 10 pages. So it was essentially too much, but pared down, like cut down, it was going to be great. When Robert Shaw, who himself was an accomplished writer, he was a screenwriter, he read it, he was like, "Oh, this is too hard for me to play. There's too much John Huston in this, in some of the dialogue. Huston could say this, but I can't do it as well as him. And let me have a chance at rewriting this." So what ended up happening is like it went through so many hands, but it always comes down to editing from either your actor or from, you know, your editor themselves. But in this, it's Shaw doing it himself. And Robert Shaw delivers that speech like it's like one of the greatest things of all time. And it really is. And I don't know, it's legendary.
That's really interesting. So they gave Robert Shaw the ability to look at it and edit it down to something that he feels comfortable that he could do in character. A lot of directors will just not work with the actors like that. Or on the flip side, there's actors, you know, like Marlon Brando, for instance, who's famous for this, who would constantly complain about all the dialogue they're giving and all the direction and try to want to write it themselves. And Spielberg was happy enough to let multiple people rewrite it, including the actor himself, to where everybody was comfortable with what was going to be said for this speech. I think that's, for a director to be willing to relinquish that power, especially to an actor when usually they don't, is really cool, and it really pays off here.
It shows that they know, like, background, what his credibilities are, and it shows that they trust him to know his character, himself as an actor, and himself as a writer. So I think it's really smart to give something like this to the actor in advance and say, "Hey, tell me what you think. If we need to adapt, we will. Give a shot at it." And I love it because he was able to rework it in a way that made it comfortable for him, like Zach said, but also in a way that worked for the character who he had, I'm sure at that point, had gotten to know. Because as an actor, you get to know the character that you're acting, and, you know, if something feels right to you for that character and whatnot. I really like when you see stuff like this, but you're right, we don't see it very often, at least not that I'm aware of.
I think we see it more with Spielberg in the sense that the Indianapolis speech itself in Jaws, like the whole speech is fantastic. We talk about dialogue a lot for dialogues, but I'm going to talk about the way that they shoot the scene. And it's something that Spielberg always talks about. It's like, if I have good actors, I don't have to cut the scene. I don't have to have multiple shots. I just need this one shot. I know it's going to work because the actors are so great that you're just going to edit it in your mind yourself. And this is one of the scenes where you're just kind of watching him. Hooper is sitting in the frame watching Robert talk about how we went to Hiroshima and all this stuff happened. It was the 13-footers and, you know, we went into the water, and obviously it's like, it's so engaging because it's a story within a story, but the way that he delivers it is just an all-timer. If you want to see what good acting is, great acting is, it is this, right? And yeah, he distills it down for himself. It's just a testament to what Robert Shaw was. I love this man. Alrighty, on to the best needle drop or use of score on this movie. Zach, what's that rinky dink guy that made the score for this movie? Who is he? What is this?
John Williams. Next question.
What's a John Williams?
How do you even talk about Alayla in this movie? This is the most iconic score of all time.
You know what I should have done?
How do you even talk about this?
I should have told Tasha. We got to have her on at some point, but I should have just been like, "Yo, can you give me a spiel about the score for Jaws?" Because I feel like there's nothing, like, she could probably have something extremely intellectual to say about this, but there's nothing we could say that could, like, this is one of the most iconic scores of all time, number one, and it is the start of one of the greatest duos working together ever in cinema, or no, ever in just any artistic history of duos, which is Spielberg and the legend himself, John Williams.
It's kind of funny when you think of legendary pairings of directors, it's usually with an actor or with a cinematographer. But when I think of Spielberg and his pairing, I think of John Williams. And I can't think of another director where I think of that for, where they have, maybe Nolan and Hans
Yeah.
Zimmer is a modern version of that. But Spielberg's one of the best to ever do it. And John Williams is arguably the best to ever do it for, writing scores. What else can you say about him? I wrote nothing down for this. Like, this is,
I've got something.
John Williams has a list of, if you
Cat.
want to name like the 5 most iconic just scores in the film history, John Williams has like at least half.
Kat, do you have anything for Layla? Do you have anything
No,
to say?
I mean, what else am I going to say? Yeah, this is fantastic. It's iconic. It is so smart in the way that they designed everything because it is very suspenseful. It's not overly complicated for the most part, and it fits so perfectly. So it is one of the most iconic, like, I don't know, soundtracks
Scores of all time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like,
it's the
I think
most
the most
iconic
effective
one.
part, like my Layla for the movie, is the opening, because we don't know
Yep.
anybody in the opening. Like, we don't know these characters. They're not our protagonist or anything. And you get to the point, you're just following this guy who's following this woman into the water. And we get the whole horrifying opening scene of this movie that is happening with the visuals, but it's 100% only working because of the music itself, right? And he sets up the music then, and it always works throughout the movie. What Spielberg was talking about was, I'll just go to what he says. Part of the genius of John Williams is not just because he's the greatest composer of film since Max Steiner, but it's often how he spots music, how he places it in a movie. Something never discussed about the art of composition is the placement of music. In Jaws, John wanted the music to signal the actual arrival of the shark and not to use it as red herring. So, the whole scene where they are the shark in the estuary scene where it's like, they have the kids with the fake fin and they're in the water. That whole scene, we see everything is going awry. Everything is going crazy, but we never
get the score.
doom, doom. You don't hear any bit of it because the shark's not there, right? But then as soon as he cuts over to the other part, he's like, oh, nope, the shark's here. Here we go. It's not Spielberg that's doing it. He's giving the credit. He always lets John do his thing. John's the one who's watching the movie and putting the score in. So John Williams, he's the best of the best. Another question that the author had asked Spielberg was, what was the experience of scoring the movie? And he said, after the first scoring session, I was simply blown away. I called George Lucas and I said, George, this composer, John Williams, has written a score for me, and you have to come down here and hear it yourself. So George came down to the stages at 20th Century Fox, listened to this amazing music John had created for Jaws, and later hired him for Star Wars. So this is 75, and 77 is when Star Wars came out. So it's just people knowing people, but it's some legendary people knowing some legendary people right here.
I love it.
Yeah, like I was saying, you take the 5 most important film scores in history, and John Williams is on most. Jaws.
If you just count pulp culture, we have Jaws, you have Harry Potter, you have Star Wars, you have Indiana Jones, and what's the 5th one I'm probably missing, right? Like the 5th one's gonna be Back to the Future for me.
Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park.
Back to the Future.
Yep.
I mean,
Back to the Future is Alan Silvestri, but it's like I'll give one to like somebody else, but like
okay. Close Encounters. I mean, even if it's not like a
Close Encounters. Never mind.
Never mind. Indiana Jones one.
Yeah.
Close Encounters is 5 because Close Encounters is one of the greatest things that John Williams has ever done. Tasha, she always talks about Sabrina, but like I always talk about Close Encounters. But every time I listen to Close Encounters, I'm like, y'all really did not give this music enough credit. And it's the next movie that he and Spielberg did together. And E.T.
some of
E.T.
his
score is fantastic.
Some of his work in the Star Wars prequels is incredible, and if those movies were better, I think would have been held up to the same
Duel of Fates
standard as the original. Duel of Fates is one of the best Star Wars scores ever. Like it's up there with the Star Wars theme and the Imperial March stuff.
It's better than the Imperial March, and it's just as good as the opening as the title score for Star Wars.
So tangent, but they just re-released the original Star Wars Battlefronts on, I think, at least on PlayStation, and I bought it. And when you open it up, the score that they have playing is the Duel of Fates, and it just got me so hyped. And I remember
Bro, I just
how
rewatched
good
The
that
Phantom
score
Menace.
was.
It's still, that's the best part of the movie, and no one can say
Yeah.
otherwise besides pod racing. Pod
It
racing
really
is
is.
still fun.
Yeah. Okay, we're talking about Jaws though. Do you guys have any other thoughts on John Williams before we move on?
Nothing specifically. The jump scare with the high-pitched, scary, screeching noise, that sound effect was really well placed. And after the night of bonding on the boat, you get to see the additional barrels showing that the shark is swimming nearby. And a really positive score picks up from there. And I really like that it's almost the complete opposite side of what's been going on. It's not scary, it's positive, you're hopeful, and then we get the climax.
It's also a character thing. It's very much a character thing that everyone is kind of, or not everyone. Hooper and Quint are very antagonistic for for the decent chunk of their time. But once they, they get down, they get, to the glug glug and they start talking is like, hey, like, you want to see this scar? I got this scar doing this. And that's also improvised. But it's like little moments like that. And then they go into the whole thing with the Indianapolis, right? They're all on the same page finally. And that's why the music comes. Emotionally, that's what, at least that's what makes sense to me.
Exactly. And I want to touch on the scar comparison thing. I love it because Hooper puts his leg on the table and is like, this is from whatever. And Quint looks at it, he like pats it. Like it's so little, it's almost nothing. I lost it because that's something that I have done, I would do, and I will do again. But another moment of just good. Seeing myself in the film.
But it's like the scar that, like, for me, I've got scars and stuff, but it's like I love that. But the detail that's good is that Robert Shaw actually pulls out a real scar. But that being said, Robert Shaw, amazingly cast. You know who should have been in this movie? Come on, y'all. Let's recast Jaws. Zach, who would you put in Jaws?
Originally, I was going to replace Hooper, Richard Dreyfuss, with Dustin Hoffman because I thought they both in that era have like a really good knack for kind of this intelligent, smug, maybe not overly masculine, but undeniably charismatic character. But then I kind of had a better idea last night, so I changed it. I think Gene Wilder would have knocked this out of the park. And let me tell you why. This would have came out right after Willy Wonka and Blazing Saddles, so he would have had enough of the, career to warrant being cast in a role like this. And it would have been a different performance than what we get from Richard Dreyfuss, but it has this kind of winking, spacey, kind of odd charisma that I think would have perfectly complemented the traditional masculinity that Robert Shaw and Roy Scheider has, in a way that, the Hooper character is a little bit winking. He is kind of feeling like he's smug and feels better than everybody else, but he's also kind of talking about how much of a farce like this the mayor is with, the safety of the town, with the people thinking they caught the right shark. He always feels like he's smarter than everybody else. And we get a little bit of that with Gene Wilder and Willy Wonka. And I think he came in, and he's got the curly hair and all that too. So I think he's could have came in and been a good part.
He's got the sarcasm.
He could
do the dry humor. Yeah.
Gene Wilder's a legend. They would be lucky to have him because the people that Spielberg was actually asking, they're good, but they wouldn't have been good as good as Gene Wilder. I don't think he even thought about Gene Wilder because he thought about other people. He went to Jon Voight first. You know who Jon Voight is, right?
Yeah, I do. I don't know if I've seen anything from him that old. I've only seen him in like post 2000
Midnight
stuff for
Cowboy.
the most part.
That's iconic.
Okay.
But he was fantastic. Deliverance. But he's fantastic back then. Jeff Bridges, he was another one that was on the list. There's a long list of people apparently that they asked, and they're like, oh, either no or scheduling or things like that. It just didn't work out. And Richard Dreyfuss kind of came out of nowhere because yet again, George Lucas, he was in American Graffiti, and he's like, oh, put Richie in there, put Richard Dreyfuss, and that's how he got in the movie.
And I say this saying that Richard Dreyfuss is probably my favorite role in the movie. Like I think he plays it amazing. I also think there's a lot of other interesting actors from that time period who also could have done something like that, because it would be easy to replace the Quint just fine. That's like a very typical. No, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying that's like that's like a Marlon Brando type, role right there. Like I feel like I would have to put Marlon Brando in if that was what I was thinking about. but I feel like there's a lot more different options for the Hooper character.
More options, but that's what I'm saying. Quint is like Robert Shaw. If Robert Shaw didn't do that, I don't think they could have really pulled it off better.
No, I don't think so. He really does kill that part.
So, Kat, recast a role. Who would you put in your version of a modern Jaws?
So I went with the first person right off the bat, Willem Dafoe for Quint, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
His lighthouse speech.
But that means I can't have Robert Pattinson as Hooper. That's too on the nose. But he could do it. So I have like a whole modern thing.
Let him cook. Let her cook.
I put Jason Schwartzman as Hooper. I think that he could deliver it really well.
Wait, who's directing this?
Me.
You're starting
me.
You're starting to put together some interesting reoccurring characters that you like to talk about.
Truly.
That's what I'm saying.
I have a rotation.
Yeah, you really are talking about.
Dang, she got
hold on. Hold on. So
Wes Anderson stuff.
I tried my best to avoid a lot of Wes Anderson for this one. I got a note about a Reddit thread, though, but that's for later. So my first pick was for Quint to be Willem Dafoe. I didn't get to Hooper until after I thought of Ellen, and I said Emma Stone could totally do Ellen. But then I thought Hooper, and then I go, who would be Brody? And I started thinking, I'm like, the only person I ever want to see Emma Stone with in a movie, Ryan Gosling.
Too good looking.
No, Crazy Stupid Love is like... their dynamic, forget La La Land, Crazy Stupid Love dynamic, like I want to see that, but like in this realm. So I had that, and then I couldn't think of a mayor, so I decided Steve Carell, because I love my man. On point.
You know what? I just thought a good mayor, I think Edward Norton would have been kind of an interesting mayor if you're doing a modern one.
Yeah?
It's kind of just that, it would be different, but he can kind of do that, like, I'm not listening to you, smug type thing.
So the third act of Glass
Onion. It would be an interesting one. So yeah.
Or like what he is in Birdman.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Like, but maybe he would even be a better Hooper in that scenario. But like I think he would, for the vibe of the movie you're trying to do. And also, I pulled up Grand Budapest Hotel since you were just going through.
I was not. I avoided Wes Anderson
because I saw William Dafoe and then Schwartzman. I was like, let me just pull up this movie and look at the cast. See if cast just going off this.
I'm not. I chose Schwartz.
Well, if you would have said Saoirse Ronan, then I would have been like, okay, she really is.
No, I chose Willem Dafoe, then Emma Stone.
It worked well in mine, but I'm not gonna pick her though. She doesn't feel she's not perfect for my vibe. I don't think she's perfect for what I'm gonna do with her.
Sorry, I'm done giving you crap. Yeah, I like that.
No,
I like what you're.
I think my cast is good, and I chose Steve Carell. So I forgot that him and Emma Stone did the Battle of the Sexes tennis movie that we watched and then forgot about immediately.
Most people forgot.
Shot by Linus Sandgren, who has done much better work. He's the one who shot La La Land.
Well, so I was going through seeing what movies people had been in because I was trying to think of dynamics and such. And I really like Steve Carell when he's in like a dynamic where he is like not the bad guy, but like the asshole. What's the water part? Yeah. Well, the way back is something I thought of too. Yeah. Because he does it really well. And I think he'd be a really good mayor. So those I came up with last night when I completely forgot that I hadn't done my recast.
Oh, I did mine. I did mine like 3 weeks ago. I've got this down well.
Well, I prepped it. I prepped it a couple weeks ago, and I had a Reddit thread popped up, and I was scrolling through it because I like to. I thought it was hilarious, and someone just did like a Seth Rogen comedy as his recast. So he's got Brody as James Franco, Hooper as Michael Cera, Quint as Seth Rogen, the mayor as Danny McBride, and Ellen as Aubrey Plaza, and I'm like. That's me. I am not this Redditor, but that's me.
Danny would actually be amazing.
Danny McBride would be the shark.
No, he'd be the effects guy from Tropic Thunder. He's like, the shark's not working.
The shark.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if this was still like 2008, that would get made immediately.
Oh yeah. No, I saw that. It's from 5 months ago. I don't even know how to say this person's Reddit account, so just Google it. You'll find it. It's the first thing that pops up on Google.
Vikash, who do you have for a caster role?
Okay, before I get into it, I'm gonna throw some stories down because these are some new and good stories from Spielberg.
Yes,
and he's talking about how he cast Roy Scheider in this movie. Zanuck and Brown, the guys who produced this, the guys who bought the right for the book and really saw the vision of this, of this movie. They're the reason this even got made in the first place. And they kept pestering Spielberg, like, who do you want to lead this movie? Who's Brody? Who's Brody? And he loved Roy Scheider from The French Connection, Wolf Friedkin, Gene Hackman, goated movie. But he was at a party randomly, and he is in the depths of just trying to figure out, like, who am I going to get in this movie? Who am I going to get in this movie? And Roy Scheider, out of nowhere, comes, sits down with him. And he said, oh, you look awfully depressed. And I said, oh, no, I'm not depressed. I'm just having trouble casting my movie. He asked me what the film was. I explained it was based on the novel called Jaws and told him the entire plot. At the end of it, Roy said, wow, that's a great story. What about me? I looked at him and said, yeah, what about you? You'd make a great Chief Brody. That's it. I love that, because I've had a situation like that happen in my life, and I'm just like, that's how you cast the movie. Like, the vibes are just right for that. And he's amazing that. Brody. Y'all gotta watch All That Jazz at some point. You're gonna be like, wait, what? This is the same guy? Like, yeah, like he's not dominant in this, but in that he's almost the complete opposite. That's a podcast worthy movie right there. But another little story is Murray Hamilton, the guy who plays the mayor.
Mm-hmm.
You know how Spielberg found him? He was in The Graduate, and he used to be on one of these shows, FBI Story.
Who was he in The Graduate?
I have no idea. But that's what I thought about. I assume he's one of the characters in The Graduate. But FBI Story is a TV show, right?
Oh, he's Anna Bancroft's husband.
Oh, he's the husband. Okay.
Yeah.
Spielberg knew him from FBI Story and The Graduate, and that is just Spielberg knowing character actors. Like, every time, like, he's like, oh, I saw this person in this movie, now I want him in my movie. Or like, I saw this person in a show, so I want to put him in my show. It's like the whole cast of The Post is like all of the best TV actors possible. Spielberg knows how to find great character actors and how to make them work within his story. And Murray Hamilton is probably the best character actor that has to be a character actor in this movie that actually matters. So,
the role of the mayor, I love.
He knocks it out of the park.
It's fantastic. Yep. They have a good balance of that political pressure, small town, beach town. Tourism is the only thing that keeps their lights on, while also at the end of his little plot, he is a dad. He's still got a family. They humanize him after all that political stuff. I think they balanced it really well. So him being like, I don't want to say like a cliche. He is the origin of that cliche type, I feel like, at least in the blockbuster sense. He does it very well. I applaud it. We were talking about it when watching. We're like, this is probably one of the better roles that has been like well-rounded in the movie. Not an insult to anyone else's.
Oh, you don't know.
Definitely. Yeah, they give him a complete arc.
Oh, yeah. I loved it.
You can have small characters and they can play valuable roles, and they don't have to be in the entire movie or in 5 movies. I gotta stop dunking on modern movies like that, because there's plenty of modern movies that do it right. And being said, my recasting for this movie is a modern Jaws.
Let's go.
Chief Brody. And these are all character actors too. The first person that came to mind for Chief Brody, like the sort of vibe I was thinking of, was Hugh Laurie, the guy who plays House in House MD. He's the dad of Stuart Little, but he's not mine. Michael Shannon is my Chief Brody. Think about it. Okay. Think about it. Let me cook.
He's got the right intensity for it.
The mayor. First, I thought of Bill Camp. Anytime I see Bill Camp, I want him, like, I feel like he could play it. But my mayor would be Bob Odenkirk.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm typecasting him as like the Saul role, but that's exactly what the mayor is, right?
Yes.
He's just got a schmooze. Yeah.
And that's what the job is. And I was just like, okay, Bob Odenkirk. We got Michael Shannon playing, the chief. Mm-hmm. Robert Shaw. So Quint. I went back and forth with a few things. So there's Joe Morton. Terminator 2. The Miles Dyson, the guy who, creates the Terminator. That's him. Or I was thinking Nick Offerman. Okay. Nick Offerman's the one I actually ended up going with, because he just has that, that sort of vibe. Coleman Domingo, the guy who plays Ali in Euphoria, he came up too. Okay. Coleman or
that would have been a good one.
Those are only 2. I prefer Coleman out of the 3 because he's a little bit younger. But like, how in that episode of Euphoria, the one where it's just Rue,
the bonus episode,
Rue, yeah, it's just Rue and him in the bar. in the diner. And that's exactly
Mhm.
what the most dramatic moment that like Robert Shaw has to sell is. And Coleman Domingo is just one of the greatest actors we have right now. And he's kind of the same age. And I think he would bring something just as Robert Shaw brought. I think he would bring something amazing to Quint.
I
So
think it'd be really good. Great
Yeah.
selection.
J.K. Simmons would have probably been pretty good for something
Yeah.
like that too.
true.
His
True.
ability to, he has an intensity to him. He's maybe still a little wacky for it, but he
He's
still
too
would have been pretty
intense.
good.
He's too intense. There's no
Yeah,
heart
it might
behind
be
him.
too intense.
I think Coleman Domingo has like he has heart within him, and when he comes to like the moment of like that night where they're drunk, I can
Mhm.
see Coleman doing that and just bringing like when he gets to the point
Yeah.
where he's just sitting there talking about sharks and going down and delivering the bomb at Hiroshima, like that thing, he would have sold the crap out of it. Like I would want him to do that.
If he was still alive, Alan Rickman would have been able to be really great at something
100%.
like that too.
Ooh,
Yeah.
he would have been cold too. He would have been cold.
He could have done it.
Yeah.
Okay, so
If we're doing a
R.I.P.
modern-ish casting.
R.I.P.
Yeah.
Chief Brody, I went Michael Shannon, but for Brody's wife, I wanted someone of culture. I went Maribel Verdú. She is in Itu Mama También. You know her from Pan's Labyrinth, Zach.
Yeah.
She's the not the mother, but the other woman that's like kind of caught in the in between all the stuff and the rebels and all that. But y'all didn't watch The Flash. She was recently in The Flash as the Flash's mother. She's amazing actress who doesn't really get too much work in America anymore, but she would be fantastic as the wife because she has this heart to her, and she definitely would have been perfect to like, the pairing of Brody and Lorraine in the original movie. They would have been able to do that really well. And the one
I
I've
don't
been
know if I've
holding
seen
off
her.
on,
Sorry.
no,
You haven't seen Pandora's
No,
Labyrinth.
I'm scrolling through
Pan's
IMDb.
Labyrinth.
I don't think
Jesus
you.
Christ.
Pans. Why did I say Pandora's? I was thinking Pandora's box. Yeah. I was thinking. Okay.
We did watch the Avatar.
I'm gonna
land.
cut this, but we did watch the Jenny Nicholson Avatar one too. That was pretty good.
Sorry.
Anyways,
You don't need to cut that. I mean, yeah, it was good. Jenny Nicholson's awesome.
I love Jenny.
My recast for Hopper for Jaws, I didn't want to go with someone who is, first of all, that's an ichthyologist. That is a STEM character. And for me, my personal reflection of what I've seen from the STEM field always is that you're better off having a woman because they're always going to be smarter at everything. And that means like Jennifer Lawrence in Don't Look Up, right? She's playing in, a STEM character, or like Annihilation. There's a lot of STEM women that are like Natalie Portman and every other character pretty much leading that movie is STEM. But me, I wanted someone who's upper 20s, kind of has that, that millennial vibe, kind of sardonic. First one I thought of was Haley Lou Richardson. You've seen her in White Lotus season 2.
Yeah.
But
I
the
think
one I
she'd be
ended up
great.
going with for Hopper is Florence Pugh.
Yes.
Okay.
Both beautifully casted, but I'm a Flo girly. So.
But like what Flo does, like I think like her vibe very much lines up with what Hopper does, right? Or Hooper does. And Hooper being Florence Pugh, I think it's perfect because every single step of the way, she could sell every single bit of that, in my opinion.
She could do the same thing just with a more modern approach, but literally like same angle of sarcastic line work, being a professional, but knowing that she's getting like passed over because she's young or grew up wealthy. Like these types of things that we see in the 75 film could be done now with her in the
it could be
role.
as simple as her coming in and bringing wine bottles, and then a Michael Shannon Chief Brody doesn't even wait to air it or whatever.
She's got a Russian accent from Marvel.
No. Stop. You're going too
Drink
far.
the wine. I'm not even going to try to do an accent.
You're going too far. Don't ruin it for me.
I'm sorry.
I think Florence would be fantastic in that
She'd
movie.
be great. No, honestly, she's really good. I really enjoy seeing her and stuff, and she pulls that sarcasm and professional...
The dry humor.
But I think her really natural vibe is a STEM vibe in a good way. So she's got that sauce.
I love it.
Already on to soapbox takes. Zach, get up on your soapbox. What take you got about Jaws?
So we talked about this a little earlier. Why did we stop using this formula? The last movie I can remember that actually tried to use this Jaws formula of building tension to the big monster or whatever, the antagonist, and then at the end just going nonstop with it, was the Godzilla movie from
Godzilla,
2014.
yes.
Yeah, which was not even close to as good as Jaws. But like, why aren't we ripping these off like they do for Speed, John Wick, Die Hard? You see so many Taken. You see so many recreations of these type of movies, but I really don't see people taking the Jaws formula anymore. Like, why?
The only movie recently that did it was Crawl, and there's like a hurricane going on or something, and she's trapped in the house, and there's an alligator in the house, and she's got to fight it, and there's even Tarantino loved the movie, but like, yeah, it happens once in a while. They make shark related movies, but they're never following this formula, and it's my complaint on National Treasure for like adventure movies. It's like there's a formula that's been made, it works, but you don't need to have the same necessarily elements. You can change it up to as to where it's set, how it's set, what the monster is. Nope comes very close. I think Jordan does his thing with it though, but it's like it's a very rare thing to use Jaws anymore, and they should rip off the formula. The best form of flattery is ripping off somebody, and the entire art of making movies is ripping off who you love, and everybody loves Spielberg. Go rip him off accurately.
And what I want to say too, just to clarify, formulaic doesn't always have to be bad. I know often I maybe trash on like a Marvel movie as being too formulaic. Well, that's because the formula there is obvious, it's overdone, and it's not anything new or interesting. You can take a movie and follow the formula and still find a way to subvert it, a way to show a new angle, different types of situations to make it interesting. So why aren't people doing that?
Black Panther actually did that. The first one actually did that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why it's a rare. Good Marvel movie.
And it's rare that it happens, right? What do you have to say, Kat?
Well, so my soapbox was Spielberg has perfected the man versus beast or other formula, which is literally feeding into the same thing. If you look at his history, I have not seen Duel, but isn't Duel a man versus something?
Truck.
We got Jaws, we have Jurassic Park, we have The Lost World Jurassic Park, a sequel, but still same concept. We got War of the Worlds. He's gone through this concept and he's worked it into something where people will replicate it, but they're not replicating it right, or they're trying to divert from this Spielberg formula that he has basically blueprinted for us. Here you go, everybody. Have a blueprint of a formula for a movie that you can do really well on and do a lot for, but no one wants to do it. They want the Marvel formula, but they don't want the Jaws formula, and I want the Jaws formula.
You can use the Jaws formula, but the problem is that if you use the Jaws formula, you have to make a risky movie, meaning that it's not IP based. It's not, I mean, technically, okay, y'all haven't seen it. I'm just going to go on the rant of it. Is that literally today is June 1st. Today on Netflix, Godzilla -1 just came out, Zach. Okay.
Oh,
knock it out. Okay. It just came out. And there's a very big Jaws theme to it. And it takes this formula, and Godzilla -1 is one of the, it's like I said, it's Jaws, it's Dunkirk, and it's this amazing human movie that they made with the boogeyman of Jaws being Godzilla instead. And the movie sets up the actual stakes of Godzilla the same way that Jaws does. And I'm telling you, once you see the opening of Godzilla -1, you're just going to want to watch the movie. It's like, y'all start the movie this way? And Jaws does the same thing, except on a little bit of a smaller budget. And technically, Godzilla -1 is a $15 million budget. And you're going to be like, no way. They did not make this movie for this much. And they spent 10 times this on a regular Godzilla movie, and it's not as good as this. And it's like, oh, it's because they used the Jaws formula. I didn't think about it. You're right. This is a good conversation right here. I didn't even think about that.
And it's not that we're saying you need to like do the exact like plot points and everything, but the general guide of you want to have humanity humanized, but you want humans versus something else. You want to get
something mythic.
A group of people that would not normally interact with each other. You want them to come together to fight this beast. You want there to be actual like losses and actual stakes involved, and you want to be entertaining with a solid pacing.
You have no idea how you're talking about all this. I'm thinking of Godzilla -1. It is exactly that. Exactly.
I'm excited. We wanted to see it, but I think
it
was around the holidays or something. It came out, and then we were sick, and then holidays, and We said we'll wait till it comes out.
It was the one last year I regretted missing in the theaters the most, so I will definitely watch it now that it's on Netflix.
No, excited to see
amazing. It really is. But my soapbox take, I'm gonna go off the top and let's listen to a legend talk about this movie first. This is Tarantino.
Pinnacle of that. Favorite Spielberg movie? Well, I think it's Hook, isn't it? No, it's not Hook. I actually like Hook. I'm sorry. I think Jaws is the greatest movie ever made. Maybe not the greatest film, but it's the greatest movie ever made. I actually think Jaws is the greatest movie ever made. Not the greatest film ever made, but what's supposed to be a movie, everything that a movie is supposed to be, You're never going to get better than Jaws. Jaws is the pinnacle of that. It's the greatest movie ever made. Look, when you say perfect movies, you're talking about any individual person's aesthetic. Yeah, but but even trying to account for all aesthetics, the perfect movie kind of crosses all aesthetics to one degree or another. Might not be your cup of tea, but there's nothing you can say to bring it down. And I think Jaws fits into that. Well, there's not many of them. That just bemoans the fact that the film art form is hard. And then there's other movies that can get in its rarefied air. But as far as a movie is concerned, there's no making it better than Jaws. There's no better than Jaws. Mm-hmm. It is the best movie ever made. Mm-hmm. And it shows how badly timed most movies made before Jaws were. Well, what I mean by that? I prefaced it by not saying it's my favorite Spielberg movie. I just said it's the best movie ever made. Yes. Okay. But what I meant by that, just to one degree or another, is like Spielberg and a lot of his cohorts grew up seeing those kind of movies and the theater. It's like Journey to the Center, Henry Levin's Journey to the Center of the Earth. He's going to run to go and see. And Richard Fleischer's Fantastic Voyage, he's going to run and go see. And Gordon Douglas's Them, he's going to run and go see. Now, not all of those, especially in the case of Gordon Douglas's Them, but most of them weren't directed that well. They were assignments given to journeyman directors who did their best with them. Right. All right. And that was how we were used to seeing comic book, that kind of movie experience, as opposed to a Spielberg who no, this is exactly the kind of movie he likes. This is exactly the kind of movies he was put on earth to make. And he's going to make it within an inch of his life as effective as it possibly can be. And, Michael Anderson isn't putting that kind of work in Logan's Run. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Gotcha. But at the end of the day, I think my favorite Spielberg directed movie, again, with Jaws carved out on its own Mount Rushmore, all right, is Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
I find it two things hilarious. One, Tarantino just took 10 minutes, it felt like, to just say that Jaws is his favorite movie over and over again. Now, that part at the end was insightful, though. Two, bring me back to our Insight pod, just seeing the little notification pop up on your phone that said, Kroger is celebrating Pride Month.
That's what it said?
Yeah, it did.
What the email was.
It said Happy Pride, and I'm like, what?
That had me cracking up. Just, thanks, Just add that to Bo Burnham's song about, whatever.
Jeff Bezos.
Yeah. Anyways, no, I think he makes a good point there. When we talk about, the difference between a movie and a film, this is a film, but Jaws as a movie, as an entertainment property, is probably one of the most successful of all time. You put it with Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back. You put it with maybe The Godfather is more filmed than that. Indiana Jones is probably a better example.
The hot take right there. He said Temple of Doom is his favorite movie from Spielberg. Oh my god.
Yeah, we won't get into that. But it's a good point that a lot of people, when they see film, they see it as an entertainment property. They want to go be entertained. Nothing wrong with that at all. They might not consider it more as an art, but more as a vehicle for being entertained. And Jaws is the perfection of that formula. Like me and Kat were talking about, that formula is the best way to do it. And Spielberg, like he said, was put on this earth to make films like that.
I love this man.
But the first half was, he's giving love to the movie, but it was very much the second half that he's talking about how before Jaws was made, these movies were kind of half-baked efforts from directors trying to just, if I make this movie, I'll make another one, journeyman directors. And Spielberg came and actually, he was like, oh, this is perfect for me to some extent, and I'm really going to put my heart and effort behind this. And he was like, hey, y'all remember you can actually make good movies that are also crowd pleasers, right? Like, nowadays we rarely have those sorts of movies. You have an Oppenheimer, you have a Dune, you have the Batman, you have the Apes movies, and I'm talking about Furiosa, Fury Road. I'm talking about a very select group of directors that get these bigger movies now. Matt Reeves, Nolan, Greta Gerwig, Denis Villeneuve, George Miller, who, when they get this money, they push the art. They try to make magnificent movies where it's like, over the years, it becomes rarer and rarer that like people are willing to go on the journey that Spielberg went on to make Jaws. And I think all these directors, maybe besides Nolan, have like had a lot of hard time trying to make their movies, or like they make really distinctly, stylish movies that have gone onto the big stage of like, just across the world and done really well. I'm not going to talk about, what's going on with Furiosa box office wise, because I don't think that matters. I think that anybody who watches that movie is really, really going to love that movie to some extent. I mean, it's a great revenge movie. Alrighty, that being said, on to the Oscars. Did this movie get any Oscars? Did it deserve any more? Zach, let's dive into the 1976 Oscars for the 1975 movies.
Jaws had 4 nominations and 3 wins during that year. A win for film editing, a win for music, original score, a win for sound. At this point, sound and sound mixing was together, which I believe it is back together now. And it had a nomination for Best Picture, but did not win it. It also, just as a note, did not have any Best Director nominations or acting nominations, which in the Spielberg HBO doc, it's mentioned how much that pissed Spielberg off because he really thought that he deserved it.
There's
and I can imagine that.
Of like,
I'm 28. I can understand being 27 and putting something out like this and being like, why the hell are these people not like kissing the ground where I stand? Like, this is, incredible work. Let me tell you, though, the other movies that were nominated.
No. I'll hit that in a second, but it's very much the same thing as the Ava DuVernay, Key and Peele thing, where it's like, how do you nominate the movie for Best Picture, but not nominate the director for the same movie, right? It's the same sort of thing. Yeah. And obviously, you said there's only 5 directors that were nominated, as they still are. The directing for 1976 Oscars was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Milos Forman, amazing. AmeriCorps from Fellini. So it's Forman, it's Fellini, Barry Lyndon, Kubrick, Dog Day Afternoon, Sidney Lumet, and freaking Robert Altman for Nashville.
Yeah,
so it's Altman,
tough,
Lumet,
man.
Kubrick, Fellini, and Forman. These are all. It is rare that the Oscars get it this right, where it's like the 5 people on my fingers. These are the people that people are still talking about today.
Except they didn't get them right. Movies. That's the funny part. Is that this is a 5 untouchable group of directors, but Spielberg's directing and Jaws deserve to be on this list. That's what the funny part is. True. I don't know who you take off, but it's like they got it right in one way, but they really didn't, because Spielberg, especially with we've seen what he's become over his career, deserves to be on this list.
You can make a whole podcast episode just about this, literally.
Yeah,
like there's a whole conversation to be had about every single one of these movies and the merits and the discounts to each one. And I'm not even going to get into it because I don't even know who I would pick, because I've seen 4 of these. I don't know if I've seen AmeriCorps, but I've seen at least 4 of these, and they're amazing movies. Actually, these are amazing movies from amazing directors. So I don't know. Like, yeah, he should have been there. That's obvious, but I don't know if he deserves to, he might deserve to win, honestly.
He does. That's the thing. He does.
Like taking the judgment.
What do you mean
out.
Might? What do you mean might? This is what we just said. This is one of the most iconic movies of all time. Yeah, he deserves to win.
But they were judging it within a year of its release.
I know. Well, that's the problem.
That's
George
the problem
Miller.
with this.
This is George
why we
Miller.
have the Golden Pursuit.
2015 Oscars, 2016 Oscars. This is Fury Road level work, right? Where it's like Spielberg took everybody to school. And
this is Jaws level work.
But you get what I'm saying. I'm talking about comparison Oscar-wise, not work-wise.
I understand what you're saying, where it swept a lot of the technical awards. Fury Road did, but then George Miller got stifled for Best Director. I get what you're saying.
Rude.
And I'm surprised that John Williams won. I mean, I think, so this movie was the biggest movie this year. It caught everybody by surprise. There's a whole thing about the release. Like, they distributed the movie little by little. So the producers wanted it to be 400 theaters instead of 800. So like people were, rabid, like needed to see this movie. So they're borrowing sterling. Like, we have to see this movie no matter what. And they kept the demand is high, supply low. So it became iconic across the world, whatever. But even that, it being a hype movie, they got nominations and they were deserved nominations. I will say I would have liked to have seen at least maybe a camera one. I don't know. I don't think the script needs it necessarily, but I would have at least liked to have seen, a cinematography one.
Yeah.
The first shot where the guy's following the girl into the water, watching, the 4K copy, like the sun, setting in the back. I was like, this is one of the best shots I've ever seen. Like, this is one of the most beautiful shots I've ever seen in my life. And we don't even talk about it for Jaws because this movie is just that iconic.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God. Even the list for the cinematographers is iconic, honestly. Like, John Alcott won for Barry Lyndon. Barry Lyndon's one of the best shot movies of all time, too, in my opinion, too. Legacies. Through the prism of time, this movie, we should just call this category the Jaws at this rate.
Yeah.
Because, to live up to the standard of what a legacy of a movie can be, like, this is one of the first movies ever put on VHS. This is one of the biggest movies that has ever been seen. This might be the most rewatched movie before, like, the 1975 and before, not counting, like, Star Wars, every single year. Because this movie has never left pop culture, and it's just as strong today. And it's not just even the movie culture, right?
No, I agree. And there's there's non-film people, like just normal Joe Schmo. I like to watch movies people, and they have just as much love and passion as we do for this film. Maybe not to the technical capabilities that we're seeing, but they love the movie. It's great. It's a classic for them. They grew up with it. They watch it every summer with their family. They show their kids this movie. Like, this is a movie that's been basically watched with families for generations, and it continues to live. And I love it. I'm over here, 50-year-old movie. I don't usually watch movies that are this old. And that's not a diss on movies that are that old. It's just there's so much newer stuff that's out that more often than not I'm watching something newer,
Yeah.
But I love Papa Spielberg for this.
I try to watch as many old movies as possible.
Well, yeah, but I ain't got time. And I know you got less time than I do, but I ain't got time.
I spent my time in high school doing that.
Yeah, no, I didn't get into watching movies to the degree at which y'all did until college, and I moved here.
I did want to say, while I was thinking about it, I think it's funny you brought up Tarantino, because I think part of the legacy of this movie is how incredible it is that Spielberg did this at his age, like at 27 years old. I don't think it was actually till Tarantino did Pulp Fiction, and I think he was about 30 when he made that. And not saying that Pulp Fiction is bigger than Jaws, but it was until Pulp Fiction that we saw a movie made by a young director with such a major cultural impact. I'm 28 now. Spielberg was 27 when he made Jaws. You have to be a visionary to be able to do that without, the experience that growing older gives you.
Like, Jaws is the start of pop culture, in my opinion. I'm trying to think of a movie, at least movie-wise, where I'm like, oh, this is in pop culture still. And I don't see anything before 1975 in my head that comes up. And it's
Godfather, wasn't that before?
Or yeah, Godfather's 72. Godfather.
That might be the only one.
Yeah. But even then, I feel like more people watch Jaws than Godfather. Because I feel like people just say they watch Godfather, but they haven't seen The Godfather.
I mean, I don't know if you can make the argument, but like freaking Looney Tunes is probably one of the first pop culture pieces of like film, technically.
Yeah. Right. Go back to Tom and Jerry, though. You could add Mickey Mouse, but I'm talking about, I guess it's probably more like adult stuff, I guess. This is more adult in some sense.
I get what you're saying.
No, I know what you mean.
The influence is there. It's like, I was like, there's a place in Japan, they have Jaws hot dogs. If you go, you've probably seen it. They have the Jaws drinks at bars where it's like blue water or blue drink, and then they dip the shark in there, and there's like blood going everywhere. People watch this movie July 4th weekend. They sit on freaking the tubes and watch the movie in water, which sounds horrifying in the first place. but like
I would
the
never.
culture for this movie is still there. And it's like,
Oh yeah,
it's the humanity of the movie that keeps you there. It's the pacing, it's everything else in between. And I feel like if this movie goes out of style, then something's wrong with humanity. It says something about humanity if they are not watching this movie anymore. And it's rare for me to even say that. It's a hot take to say that about humans, but that's how great Jaws is.
Speaking of the legacies, do we want to talk about quickly our top 5 Spielberg movies?
Let's go.
So before we get into MVP, perfect time for the legacies of this movie that Spielberg has one of the greatest careers ever. John Williams does just right beside him. But for Spielberg, what is y'all's top 5 for Spielberg?
So I had a hard time coming up with this, and I was actually surprised by my list. So I'll give it to you, but I'll start at 5 and go down just so it's a little more dramatic.
Oh, I'm not ranking mine. I'm not going to go through the hell of that.
Oh, well then should I not rank it? I don't want people to get all pissy at me. I'm not going to rank it then. I don't.
Do
want
you
people
have
to
it
get
ranked
pissy
with
at my
definitive?
list.
Like
I do.
You got okay. No, rank
I
it.
do.
Rank
I
it.
went through
What
it.
is your rank?
Okay.
Rank
Well,
it.
I hope I don't get roasted. But like, okay, so the 5th spot is probably the one that I could have switched with like 10 different movies. The other 4 I feel pretty confident about. So on the 5th spot, I have Saving Private Ryan. Honestly, that D-Day scene is one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. West Side Story, I actually have at 4, the new remake. Spielberg's still at the top of his game, even if people don't want to admit it. And I know the lead performance in that was kind of iffy, but everything else was top notch.
He's not the lead of that movie. We don't even want to talk about him. He ain't the lead.
I'm not even saying his name. 3, shocking, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Iconic. But when I was doing the list, I was surprised my inclination to put over Raiders for number 2 was Catch Me If You Can. That movie is one of the most rewatchable movies in his whole catalog.
I will say, and then more and more that Spielberg. Someone asked him a few years ago, like, "Oh, what's the movie that doesn't get enough credit from your filmography?" He's like, "Yeah, it's like Catch Me If You Can." I
love that movie.
No one gave that movie enough credit, and I always hype on that.
And then number 1, if you would have asked me before this pod, I would have not told you this.
Jurassic Park,
and I didn't think, but it's Jaws.
It's Jaws.
This is my favorite Spielberg movie.
Okay.
After watching it, I decided. So it's my favorite. I was surprised because I was like, oh, it's probably in my top 5. It's definitely in my top 10. And then I watched it this time and did my list, and I was like, oh no, this is my favorite Spielberg movie.
So I roasted my husband.
She's mad I didn't put Jurassic Park in the top 5.
No, I'm not mad.
Saving Private Ryan above Jurassic
I love Jurassic Park.
That is
it's better. Hot take. It's better. Hot take. Go ahead.
Okay, well, so most of them are the same, but mine are all more like half of them are like preference nostalgia, not at all impressive.
No, that's what I'm saying. What, like, Kat, your favorite movies?
My favorite. So number 5 is Hook, but it's because I grew up watching Hook. No, it's just childhood movie.
You can't roast me.
1 out of 5. One of the worst movies ever. I'm joking. I love.
Yes,
Hook is awesome.
I know.
Still.
Dude, in the Spielberg doc, they just completely go over Hook. Like they just completely go over.
I didn't interrupt your list, buddy.
How much they skipped over. And then they show Ready Player One, but they don't. I was pissed.
Yeah.
So I say that, and I'm putting the disclaimer: Hook is not at all one of the top 5 Spielberg of all time whatsoever. Hook is only there because there's childhood nostalgia with it. That's it.
But Kat, your favorites, it's one of your favorites. I'm asking for favorites.
Yes, I know. And that's what I'm saying is because that nostalgia.
I'm just giving you crap. Keep going.
We just messing.
Okay.
Yeah, we bullying. We're cyberbullying today.
Yeah.
Cyberbullying
Number 4.
me. Your token white woman over here getting bullied. Okay.
Number 3, 1942.
So number 4 is West Side Story. Number 3 is Catch Me If You Can. And number 2 is Jurassic Park. Classic. Loved it. Jurassic Park and Jaws. Jaws is number 1. Those are my 2 childhood movies. Like, those were on repeat in my house. We're really into Jaws and Jurassic Park. When we got an apartment together, those were 2 of the posters in our living room because we did movie posters. We had Jaws and Jurassic Park as 2 of the 4.
Yeah, we did.
So I didn't make a list. So I already know what the list is. Like, I'm so confident with this that I already know what the list is. So these are 5 movies. And I think one of them might sub out for like an Indiana Jones movie if it's that sort of day. But for these are my 5 favorites for Spielberg. And this is by no order, so don't come at me with this. So Jaws, Catch Me If You Can, West Side Story, E.T. and
Oh,
Minority
yeah.
Report. And if
Okay,
you
that
ask
makes
me
sense.
on a random day, it's gonna be Minority Report. When I think of Spielberg, that's the first movie I think of, because it's the first movie that I ever saw where I was like, oh, who's this director? I just watched War of the Worlds. What was Minority Report? That's the movie that sticks with me the most. And
Yeah.
obviously, I'm leaving out Raiders, and that in Close Encounters come as like a 6 and a 7, I guess. But that 6 and
Yeah.
7 spot, I mean, he's made so many great movies to where you could argue it with a lot of different movies.
I think a lot of people will have different looking lists. I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of people probably have Jaws and Jurassic Park near the top and Raiders, but I think because he's made so many movies that have impacted people's childhood that you'll find people with a completely different 5, and it's all okay too. It's all right
Yeah.
because he has so many good movies. He has such a deep catalog.
Like, I watched War of the Worlds when I was younger, and I would probably put that as 5, but I was scared of it, so that cancels it out. And E.T. terrified me. I was so terrified of E.T., so scared. I can't watch it.
We're probably
And it's 'cause as an adult, I'm just gonna remember being 4 years old, watching E.T. crying, saying, "Mom,
that's too
why did you
young.
do this to me? It's terrifying."
We're probably on the lower end of people that actually have West Side Story on his top 5. And my
Yeah.
Well, it's
Surprised we all do.
that he perfected the Robert Wise, the original movie. He took what that base was, and he has one issue with this movie besides that this is an elevated movie to the original, and that is rare to say. And
Mhm.
it's a movie where I feel like I'm definitely going to be rewatching that movie just as much as I rewatch, Catch Me If You Can or a Minority Report, the things that or like a Raiders, things that I come back to to Jaws and whatever Spielberg's made. Those ones that I rewatch end up being my favorites.
I think
That's why I don't have Jurassic Park on there. I love Jurassic Park. It's one of the best movies ever made too, but it's just I don't know. I didn't grow up watching it. That's all it is.
that exactly. A lot of it is growing up watching these films, which is really nice to say about a director, is that a lot of people can say, "Hey, I grew up watching this backlog of Spielberg films, and there's still more films coming out today that are just as good or better." And you have that, like, your whole life and your memories associated with each film, like, fighting for those top 5 slots. And I love it. Like, I think we watched Catch Me If You Can more than any of the other movies on this list. It's
Probably,
so
yeah.
rewatchable. You can just throw it on. It's great. It's not a long movie either, I think.
It's rare that Spielberg makes a movie that's not rewatchable. That's one common
Yeah,
thread through all of his movies is
I love it.
I mean, I guess, Schindler's List might be the exception there, and maybe Munich, but the rest of them are rewatchable because they have this sort of
Munich is
childlike
rewatchable.
energy.
I will say, in the times we live in right now, Munich is rewatchable.
But you know what I mean. Like one thing he puts a lot of energy into is making sure that these movies are fun at the end of the
Yes.
day, and
The
so
Post is
they're all
fun. The
rewatchable
Post
because
has
of
no right
that.
being fun, but The Post is so
It is.
much fun.
It is, even though it's not one of my favorites of his, but it's fun, and I
Mhm.
would rewatch it right now. Like it's a good movie.
Spielberg is the MVP of cinema as we know it today. But Kat, who's your MVP for Jaws? Who put the team on their back, and without them, this enterprise would not be as great as it is?
Bruce.
Man, nobody wants some stinking mechanical
ahead.
shark. The Bruce I like is from Finding Nemo.
Finding
okay?
Nemo.
Fish are
Okay,
friends.
wait.
Fish are friends.
I wanted to get into that. So it's kind of just obviously me messing around a tad, but like this movie is so inspirational that like you can check tons of other like ocean related movies, kids and adult, and they reference Jaws. Bruce in Finding Nemo is named after the shark. It's also a great white. And when I found that out as a kid, I'm like, oh my God, that's so cool. So shout out to Daddy Spielberg. But I just want to give like a general shout out to like the cast and crew worked really hard. Everyone deserves their flowers. I think it really I don't know if I want to give Brody or Hooper my MVP slot because Brody's so relatable and he's written to be someone you can see yourself in, and like he's the lead, but also towards the middle of the movie we get two more characters that become part of that group that go and fight the big bad. But Hooper's facial acting and then these just like great details associated with that character's so good. And he's got the sense of humor that I relate to, so I love that. But yeah, MVP slot was really hard to pick. So I just decided to shout out a lot of people.
Would love to hear that praise you just gave him.
I'm sorry. I wrote this stuff like 2 weeks ago. No,
I'm not
hey, listen.
No. I'm not saying not to praise Richard Dreyfuss. Like, I think he's a great actor and he's done some great work in his career, but it never means that we condone what they do off screen. It's like Spielberg might be the one person where I'm like, oh, he doesn't have too much wrong with him, but like these are all very much human beings.
Yeah.
I'm really just not interested in getting any of his stuff off the screen. If you want to go look it up, you can. I'm
only talking on screen.
Yeah, he's not like a super dude, but I'm not really interested in that part. So,
hence why the MVP for Catherine is Bruce, the animatronic shark.
And honestly, I don't think you're wrong to do that. If we're looking at most valuable player here in the movie, in the context of the movie, of course, probably Spielberg. But if we're not talking about Spielberg, the shark. If the shark doesn't work, the movie doesn't work, man. The movie doesn't work without the shark. That's the big bad. Shark looks like crap. Movie doesn't work.
They made a whole documentary about it.
Yeah.
Is the shark
exactly.
working?
And the shark inspired Jurassic Park, like you said. The shark in Nemo's named after it. Sharks in pop culture, actually. This is like the highlight of sharks in pop culture.
Yeah.
No, but this is the reason why there is pop culture around it.
But
did anybody know who cared about sharks before this movie, right? Probably not. Probably no one probably seen a shark before this movie, They
started killing sharks.
That's why the broken animatronic worked.
Yeah.
Peter Benchley, the author, he ended up having to become like a advocate for sharks because people are just murdering them. And obviously you see we have Shark Week now. We have every other shark movie ever made, from like Deep Blue Sea to The Shallows to freaking The Meg. Like there's so many shark movies out there now. Sharknado, yep. And it's like, the shark is the MVP of this is the force of nature that they're going up against, and it becomes mythical even in our culture nowadays. But just as mythical is Zach's MVP. Who is the MVP, Zach?
My inclination is usually to go with the director, especially for a movie like this, but I went with John Williams, and my reasoning for this is simple. You can argue the Star Wars theme, but I think this is actually the most iconic film score of all time. People who haven't even seen this movie know the da-na, dun, 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 dun. I knew that as a kid before I even seen the movie, and I think a lot of people did too. I can count on like one hand how many times scores have ever transcended their films like that, where people who've never even seen the movie know the score. And funny enough, most of the scores pretty much all come from John Williams. So he's the MVP of this movie for me.
Absolutely.
It's funny because when he got Spielberg to listen to the score at first on like the piano, he was like, no, wait, you serious? Like, that's simple? That's the score? He's like, yeah. He's like, that's it. And it's like, that's the genius of John Williams. And every single time this man puts in the work, he's trying to do something compelling. Like, even if your movie doesn't work, he is like, okay, emotionally, this is where this needs to be. This needs to be here. I'm going to make something novel for you. And he's going to try to make your movie work. And he's the MVP for this movie, for the sense that if his music is not here, this movie's not good, I think. Honestly,
absolutely.
Like, you could have, like, if you had like Bernard Herrmann or somebody scoring this movie, it would be awesome. Well, but I don't think it would have been as great as,
if we're talking about this movie as a pop culture impact. What is the most lasting pop culture impact of this movie? It's that score.
Yeah.
Really, that's what the most lasting impact is. And that's hard for a movie this great, for the score to be the most lasting part of it. That's how good it has to be, right?
But I think that speaks to like why it's lasted 49 years, is that music transcends time. If you have truly great music, no matter if I'm 28 or if I'm 70, listen to the Jaws, theme, I'm going to get goosebumps and I'm going to get scared. And that's the whole point. That's the effectiveness that John Williams has. And I'd go as far as to say that John Williams is one of the greatest composers ever to live. It's not even just movies. Like, he is, you have Mozart, you have John Williams right next to him.
Yeah.
Or above him.
Agreed.
I don't want to get with the Mozart heads on this,
you don't want to, like, if they're talking about Debussy or anybody else.
I'm just going to say that he is on the Mount Rushmore.
Mahler? Oh, you don't want to get in an argument with Tar? I'll go find Tar. I'll get Kate Blanchett.
I'm a Bach guy, you know. That's me, but that's fine.
My MVP is obvious, but I'm gonna throw to another legend to talk about the legend himself.
Jaws, the word around town and in the LA Times was that it was folly and that it was going to be a disaster. I was with Steven. They said, let's go and see the lines. And we were looking, going by all the lines in Westwood and places like that. And I said, this is it. This is going to be a major change. Once you do Jaws and then Close Encounters, well, where do you go? The bar, as they say, is set a certain level. Then what do? You get yourself into shape and you jump over the bar again. Steven's able to walk into a room, look for a second or two, say, here, move that here, give me a 25 millimeter here, put it this way, face forward, move it, silhouette here. 2 takes, 3 takes, that's enough, thanks, let's move on. It was amazing. He has a dynamic sense of real filmmaking. I'm talking about filmmaking in the great narrative tradition of American cinema. I don't think there's any doubt that Steven's work deals with specific themes in his life, which makes him a real personal filmmaker and is expressed through the images, through the choice of story, and how he deals with character. It was Cassavetes who said, if you want to be a real filmmaker, you can't be afraid of anything or anybody. Yeah, but Steven's not. And he's there with Joan Crawford, who wants him out every day. And he's got to shoot. He's got to be on schedule. And it's got to be good. Meaning that it has to have a vision. The shots have to have a point of view.
And I don't know, what do I have to say? Like, I think it's Spielberg and John Williams together. They're the reason why this movie is the MVP. Like, this movie has stood the test of time, and Spielberg knew what he was doing, even at that age. He was that confident with his work, and it could have very easily have been like Spielberg talks about it. He's like, yeah, like there's people through the movie, like through the production, were like, okay, when are we going to be done with this? Like he would literally tell me like whenever I get fired. Like literally when they come like drag me off a set and they probably replace me with somebody else. And even at that point, he is so forward with what he is able to do with all of his movies. And what Marty talks about, what Scorsese talks about is that his movies are relative, right? Every time Spielberg talks, like I see things over the years, over the 10 years I followed movies that like, oh, Spielberg's about to do this movie. He's about to do this movie. He's about to do this movie. But he rarely actually makes a movie. There's always movies like Spielberg's in talk to make a movie. Like right now he's about to make a movie with David Koepp. That's like some sort of like alien movie or UFO movie. It's definitely going to happen because it's David Koepp. But it's only if Spielberg has some sort of personal approach to it. He feels like, oh, this is something that relates to me. In that relationship, he very much mirrors into, obviously we see it in The Fabelmans. We see why he is one of the best to ever do it. And I will end my little MVP spiel about Steven Spielberg on what he says Jaws gave him. The success of Jaws gave me final cut on every single movie I have made since then. It gave me the chance to make Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I had written the story. I was writing the screenplay. No one wanted to touch it until Jaws became a phenomenon. And then suddenly Columbia was like, go make your movie. So ultimately, Jaws was the gift that kept on giving. And I think it's always going to be the gift that just keeps on giving because I don't know about y'all, but when I have kids, I got to show them Jaws. That's going to be one of those movies where it's like, okay, I got to show them The Dark Knight, Heat, Jaws, The Mummy.
Jurassic Park. All these classics.
I think it's cool that you showed the Martin Scorsese clip because really Spielberg and Scorsese have been like the yin and yang of film for like the last maybe 50 years where they both, you know, have made very different types of film, but both of them had the most impacting film on pop culture and movie culture and film culture. Those two have been the yin and yang of that. You know, Spielberg a little more popcorn, Scorsese a little more dealing with darker themes. So the reverence they have for each other is great.
Coppola, like, you know, add all the buddies.
Yeah, I'm just saying if you had to pick two.
Yeah.
If you had to pick two, those are the two.
And Lucas.
And yeah, sure, but Lucas stopped. You know, I'm just saying
Lucas
for the last 50
and
years.
Coppola stopped, but
still
like,
going.
Their effect is, you know, irreplaceable.
Yeah, no, for sure. For sure. So I just think that's interesting. It's great that all these directors have so much reverence for each other. A lot of other crafts, people don't really talk about each other in that way. A lot of times there's, you know, more, you know, feuds or whatever you want to call it. But
they get competitive.
The ego. But these directors can recognize other great work and are willing to appreciate that. And I do love that about them.
But they're brothers.
That's something I love about
just got love
artists.
for each other. That's what it is. Like Marty and Spielberg are just
Yeah.
they're amazing together.
When you look at people in these art industries, you'll still see those feuds, but I see a lot of love among them, both small artists in local communities and these larger directors or more popular and famous people involved in the art industry. And I love that because art is something that takes a lot of like adaptation, interpretation. You need to have a vast array of it in order to live life to its fullest and such. So I love to see artists supporting each other.
Definitely. And that's Jaws. So, Zach, companion movies. Do you have any companion movies for Jaws?
How do you pick a companion movie for this? If I had to pick one, it would be The Birds. Spielberg clearly pulls from Hitchcock when creating the tension in Jaws, and The Birds is a great example of this, and the idea of man versus nature that we talked about earlier. Also, now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure I wrote a paper in college comparing the two for a class. So that's funny that I'm using The Birds. So yeah, I would say The Birds, if you like this sort of man versus nature and tension, that is a great companion movie for Jaws.
Awesome. Kat, companion movies. What do you have for Jaws?
Jurassic Park, of course. It's man versus beast. It's Spielberg. It's incredible. And you'll get like, it's not at all the same movie, but you'll get like the same level of excitement and tension and like characters that may or may not survive conflicts. You get that same energy in Jurassic Park, and you have a working animatronic.
I think Jurassic Park is more of a thrilling movie than this one is.
It is. It's more of a
like on
it's
paper,
more scary.
If you
honestly.
want to compare, like Jurassic Park is a better movie. Not against saying that. I think Spielberg would agree with it.
We just spent almost 3 hours talking about Jaws, and you just said that Jurassic Park is a better movie.
I didn't say
I was going to do a pod on Jurassic Park, but I will.
I was going to say, eventually we have to do, like maybe next summer, we got to do a summer movie, Jurassic Park.
I'm going to have to rewatch it before then because I don't know if it's in my top 5. Okay, Vikash, what's your companion movie?
So my companion movies for this, I have Nope and I have Godzilla -1. Very recent movies from 22 and from 23. And both of them very much are in the same vein as Jaws. So Nope from Jordan Peele, Godzilla -1. Both are very readily accessible. One is also from Universal. Check both of them out because they are just gifts that keep on giving. Even I had an issue with Nope the first time I saw it, but after rewatching it, still a horrifying movie. And Jaws, same vibe. Godzilla -1, more for the heart. The heart of that movie and the horrifying nature of it works together, and there's so many themes there, and we're going to talk about Godzilla -1 on this pod at some point. But let me run through some random ones. Deep Blue Sea, Rennie Harlan, fun movie. The Meg, fun movie. Jason said Cape stuff. Jaws, same. It's just fun vibes. Psych, one of my favorite shows. They made an episode called The Head, the Tail, and the Whole Damn Episode. Obviously, right off of Jaws. And they redo Jaws. It's awesome. Bob's Burgers, they have the Deepening episode. They do Jaws too. So much fun. Just there's so much Jaws pop culture references where it's like if you have a favorite show, they might have done a Jaws reference. And two of my favorite ones did it too. So I love Jaws. It's one of the best things ever made.
In The Office, when they're doing the business picnic in the park or whatever, I don't know. But when they're brainstorming what skit to do, they go dunder, dunder, dun. I love The Office. Leave me alone.
Yeah, this is an irreplaceable movie, and the influence is never going to leave. At least I hope it'll never leave. But that's Jaws.
Crossed.
3 hours on it. Wow.
I love it. Already, Kat's going to become the Jaws. She's going to become Bruce, and she's going to send us out.
Real hard.
She's putting her onesie back on to look like the shark.
Yeah. Alrighty, peace and love, y'all. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for listening to this episode of Cinema Pursuit. Cinema Pursuit is produced by Catie Nadell, Zach Nadell, and Vikas Patel. Special thanks to Cole Cooper for the intro and outro music. You can listen to Cinema Pursuit on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever else you may listen to podcasts. Follow us on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram at Cinema Pursuit Podcast, Twitter or X at Cin Pursuit Pod, and check out our subreddit, r/Cinema Pursuit.